Okay, welcome everybody. We are now have the thumbs up. The meeting, the webcast is working. And so I would like to call the meeting to order at 10:33 a.m. And I can confirm we do have quorum. And with that, I would like to ask Councillor Armour if you could read the land acknowledgement.
I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robertson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walk in the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thank you for that. So with that, I would ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. Okay. Seeing none. I missed a beat. Sorry about that. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that the special council meeting agenda dated Monday, December 12th, 2022 be adopted as printed and circulated. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And now we are moving into a really interesting, fun part of the agenda, and that is our long service awards. And it's really remarkable when I look around this room. It is crazy. So what I'd like to do is read the names of the staff that are receiving the awards, and once I've done that, if everybody could come down and enter the circle here, and then we'll get a picture of everybody together, if that's okay. So I'm starting with Andrew Zanier, 10 years. Shane Taylor. All right. I was going to do the applause at the end, but that's okay. Oh, all right then. So Shane Taylor, 10 years. Simone Babineau, 10 years. Wow. David McDonald, 10 years. Amanda Hill, this is remarkable, 10 years. Julie Manzak, 10 years. Okay, now we shift it up a bit. Benita Campbell, 15 years. And Kirsten Maxwell, 20 years. Holy cow. And finally, our CAO, Denise Corey, hold your breath, 30 years. Unheard of. So we have pieces of paper, so if everybody comes down, maybe this on. Whoops. So, moving right along, we're moving to agenda item number 4, deputations. And the first one, I'd like to welcome Maureen Miller and Cheryl Harrison from MOC. They're going to give us an update on the capital redevelopment project. How exciting. Welcome. If you could just, yes, you did it, Perfect.
We good?
Perfect.
Okay.
Great.
I see you guys do this all the time, and I forget I have to do it now, so. Great, good. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you all as the newly elected council. This presentation may be slightly repetitive for those of you that were in place in September, having seen some of these slides at that time. We have some updates as well, and it's a pleasure to be able to be here to bring a capital planning update to everybody in council. So congratulations. My name is Maureen Miller. I'm the chair of the Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare Board of Directors, and with me is President and CEO Cheryl Harrison. The board's vice chair, Dave Uffelman, whom some of you saw back in September, is also here today in the gallery. Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare's vision to reimagine local healthcare, hospital care with 2 new sites is moving very close to being a reality. We appreciate the continued support of local councils through allocating funds to the capital development project for new hospital builds. We especially appreciate the $115,000 that Huntsville Council allocated to these new builds. The district has also added a cumulative $1.6 million, and Bracebridge has also chipped in for around $230,000 over the past 2 years. So thanks to all of you. It's really, really important to get started early. Earlier this summer, the ministry changed how they saw. We have to go to the. Yeah. Earlier this summer, the ministry changed how they numbered the various phases of capital development. If it wasn't already confusing and complicated enough, they changed the numbering on us. And stage 2, which we were in, is now called stage 1.3 and is part of early planning. In April, our stage 1 proposal, now referred to as stage 1.2, was approved, and Premier Ford announced this provincial government support here in Muskoka at that time to modernize and expand MAC's 2 sites, and also announced a $14 million planning grant to cover the costs of the planning work for early planning. All of stage 1, which you can see from here in the blue, all of the early planning, and detailed planning, all of stage 2, which you can see is the orange color. So to keep up our momentum, we hope to submit the stage 1.3 functional program by September 30th, 2023. So not very long away. So what has been approved? So we can assure you that what has been approved is 1 project to build 2 new sites. In Huntsville on the existing land at 100 Frank Miller Drive, which can accommodate a new build, and in Bracebridge on new land through a site selection process. I'll now hand it over to Cheryl, and she's going to go through a few of the details and remind us why we need 2 new hospitals.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Great. I'm going to keep my mask on, so let me know if you can't hear me. So thank you, Maureen, and it's a pleasure to be here with the new council and to share our exciting news on the progress that we've been making. So I'm going to begin with, so why new hospitals? You read about hallway medicine in Ontario. A patient shouldn't have to wait on a stretcher for 6 hours or more before they can be admitted to a room in a hospital. Ideally, we should be running our occupancy anywhere between 85% and 90%, and we are consistently over 100%. Last week, we were at 130% on one given day. As well, we know our emergency department, and this is a portion in this picture of our Huntsville Emergency Department, and our diagnostic services are half the size they should be today to handle the current volumes. We've used a lot of Band-Aid solutions over the years. Their layouts have adapted, but are not ideal. For example, in this nurse's station in the middle, there's also our medication room, which isn't really a room, it's just a place where we house the medication. You can imagine busy nurses trying to look after patients coming in to get medication, while at the same time, team members are trying to document care. Our diagnostic imaging department also has services throughout the hospital. We've tried to adapt when we got the new CT scanner, but oftentimes people are coming in for multiple tests. So they may have their CT, and then they have to go someplace else for their bone density all over the organization. Not a great patient experience. This is a rendering from Trillium Health Partners, their emergency department. Solving hallway medicine takes adequate space in a modern care area like this where team members can do their job. Another reason why our hospitals are in need to be rebuilt is because space is tight. An example here of people waiting to go into emergency departments or waiting to go into clinics. Oftentimes they're in pain and they're already stressed and anxious. This is an example from St. Joe's Regional Health Center, where registering and waiting should be as comfortable as possible. The provincial standard for private rooms is 80%. 80% of our hospital rooms should be private in Ontario. Our hospitals are at 15%, and the majority of our rooms are 2-patient or 4-patient rooms. Private rooms are not just a luxury, they're important. They're important for good infection control practices, privacy, and consider the space and ability for family interaction and involvement. The lack of private rooms at MAC has been a considerable challenge over the last 3 years as we've been trying to manage through the pandemic. This is an example of a private room with latest technology in it. Everything is by the patient bedside, and this is from Halton Healthcare in Milton. Some other pictures of why we need our new hospitals. We have aging infrastructure that by facility assessment is rated overall poor condition. At the top is one of our nursing stations on our inpatient unit. At the bottom is our laboratory in Huntsville. In many ways, our old buildings don't meet current best practices for healthcare delivery. And with the challenges of trying to attract and retain healthcare professionals, our dated facilities and lack of workspace should not also be an additional barrier. We've heard a lot about why can't we just renovate. Whenever we make changes, we must meet current standards, and the limits of our capacity to renovate are getting smaller and smaller. Even small renovations cost 2 to 3 times what you would expect as a result of requirement to meet current standards and because of remediating building issues like asbestos. And wouldn't this be more suitable and appropriate for our Muskoka hospitals? This is an example of a nursing station at Brockville General Hospital, again, where there's space for our team members to work as a team. Along with what Maureen has explained at this stage of the planning, we also are required to choose new land in Bracebridge. South Muskoka today is bordered by an environmentally protected ravine and residential neighborhood. The property itself is too small to support a new hospital. In last week's paper, and again this Thursday, we are broadening our reach of engagement to private landowners who can meet these criteria and are interested in discussing whether their property could potentially be considered. A hospital's location has significant impact on the sustainability and affordability of service delivery, and most importantly, the community's access. It's important to us that the future property is well suited and that all options are considered. Just like the past, this stage will involve stakeholder input from our staff physicians, volunteers, patients and families, and other stakeholders, as well as our supplemented consultant experience. We're going to be forming user groups relative to the various functioning areas and departments of the hospital to participate in these engagement sessions. And our team members are really the experts to assist us in the designing this new hospital space. They bring the knowledge of best practice and where the future may be headed in their given area of expertise. Of course, we treat our patients and families, and we want them to be engaged as well, to bring their own perspectives around receiving care in those areas. This input into future service delivery and building design is an essential component. And those user groups will be starting in early January. The funding, the ministry covers the lion's share of the project, leaving the community to raise a community share according to a formula. Generally, the community share can be up to 30% of the total project cost to cover 10% of the building cost, all furnishing fixtures, equipment in the building, and any of that revenue generating space like gift shops or parking. In the previous stage of planning, a preliminary order of magnitude was conceptualized in 2019 dollars based on assumptions. Through the next stage of planning, we will better understand the cost of the future builds based on refined planning. We know the market has changed since 2019 between the pandemic, inflation, supply chain issues, everything costs more. And we're going to be working through refresh costing with the local share committee, chaired by Maureen, on December the 15th, having recalculated our 2019 estimations to today's economy. And we plan to tell our communities more thereafter as the cost projections evolve. We are relying on our foundations, local municipalities, and the District of Muskoka, together with our own organization, to raise the local share. Each entity has to participate starting now. The bottom line is that if we have to satisfy the local share requirement and commit to how the community will pay for its share of the new hospitals, or our project will not move forward. Setting aside funds now is far easier than putting it off to raise the same amount in half the time. And we can adjust allocations up or down once we actually get more finite numbers through the process. As part of our stakeholder engagement, we are excited to hold some community open houses early in the new year to keep our communities updated about our planning work and the Bracebridge site selection process. We look forward to hearing from our local communities, and we want to know what's important to them so that their input can help us inform the evaluation criteria we'll use when we're looking at various properties. Keep in mind there are services today that the region accesses that are solely provided in South Muskoka. So one would ask, we're here in Huntsville, why are we bringing this up? There are services for our Muskoka residents that are single-sited between the two sites. So we want to have an outreach beyond just where the two hospitals are to ensure that they've got input. A series of in-person and virtual sessions are planned between January the 16th and 25th. Save the date for Huntsville open house on Monday, January the 16th at the Active Living Center. We will also be holding second series of open houses towards the end of March to seek further feedback. And through our planning journey, our website is the best place to stay informed. We look forward to your involvement in helping us make our communities, new hospitals, a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen and Cheryl. I know we had that presentation before, but there was additional information that was helpful. And I would ask if there are any questions from council. Yes, Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. 1977 or 78 was when Huntsville Hospital, okay, so 78, yes, that's what I thought. I was about 6. Corey may have been born there. I didn't quite make it. I was Fairburn, the old hospital. So yes, we're looking at 45, 50 years. Is that the normal length of a hospital before a rebuild is needed? Or are we looking, when we can do this, that we hopefully will be planning for like a 75-year term with this new build?
Well, in healthcare, technology changes, space needs change. When I've been in healthcare 40 years, so I've seen hospitals evolve as well. And oftentimes you hear by the time you've built it, you've already outgrown it. You try to really avoid that when we're looking at a horizon at 15, 20 years out and what the needs are. And again, it's a lot of things are technology driven, your emergency department footprints. The ministry's very prescribed in certain areas of the hospital where they say this is, how big an emergency department based on what you need today. So try to do our best to make sure that we're moving in and we've got a little bit of overcapacity, but it's hard to say.
Thank you for that. All right. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Thank you, ladies, both for coming in today. It was informative. What do you think would be the most important thing for council? How can we help as a council to make these hospitals happen? What do you think is the most important thing?
There we go. Thank you, Councillor Renwick, for your question. If I can be blunt, we need the money. And the local share is a critically big, important piece of this. Further to Councillor Schumacher's question, 54 years, think of what would have happened if we'd put $500,000 away every other year for those years. We'd have already had our hospital built. That's not how we build infrastructure in North America, and it won't be for the future. We really need the local council to get behind the build and to encourage those that are in the user groups to help us build the hospital that we in Huntsville, in Bracebridge, and Muskoka need. Every hospital is quite different. Cheryl and I have been asked often about, what's the trend? What do hospitals look like? And I would have to say that hospitals look like the community that they serve. So participation in those user groups is critically important for Cheryl and her team now as we go forward. Raising the local share, as you heard her say, if we don't have the local share formula articulated to the province when we submit our plan, the plan will go to the side and they'll look at another hospital. So it's that simple, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Armour.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Through you, along the same lines, you're talking about capacities, 85, 90 to 130%. So building these new hospitals, we're reducing our rooms, so we're not going to have wards anymore. I assume we're going to go more single, up to 80%. So how do you see the bed count happening in these hospitals? Are we increasing the bed count quite a bit?
Yes, we're going up over 60 beds, additional beds.
So just a quick follow-up. So that's according to how many beds we have today? So 60 beds plus, okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Morrison.
I've heard a lot of different numbers as far as the amount of years this might take. I've heard 5, I've heard 8, I've heard 12, I've heard 20. Do you know of any examples with some of these new hospitals, how long it has taken them to get from stage 1.3 to stage 7 or 8 or whatever the number is?
We are working on the assumption that given all the requirements needed to go through the 3 stages of the planning, that we will be in a position to be tendering this project and shovels in the ground sometime between 5 years from now and 10 years from now. Given that when we submitted our preliminary studies, it was more than 2 years before we heard back from the province, we need to accommodate that. But if everything went smoothly, everybody checked their boxes, we could be shovels in the ground with an approved tender as early as 5 years from now.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you. Very quick question. So what's the deadline for us to commit to a certain amount for the community share?
Partly in jest, and thank you for your question, because we, as the chair of the local share committee, we will be having our first meeting in quite some time on Thursday, and Mayor Alcock and CEO Corey have been invited to that meeting. We will be starting to discuss that timeframe. To be perfectly honest, I think we have until sometime in June to come up with how this is shared, because it's shared between our very successful foundations that are going to work very hard to raise dollars in the community, and the district, and the municipality, and the hospital. So there's many players in this. So the local share committee will be looking at what formula we come up with. And I say June simply because it will have to go back to all the individual councils. If there is a municipal contribution, we'll have to go to district if it's a district contribution, and we're hoping to be able to have that in a package to submit along with the functional design and the final design sometime in September.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. Thank you for the presentation. I think if we've heard anything today, I've heard that the most important thing we need to do is start to come up with a plan for the money. So I know we're just going to be starting 2023 budget talks very soon, so more of a comment, but we need to really start to talk seriously about that.
Thank you for that. That's a good comment. Councillor Armour.
Thank you. Through you, just a quick one. I noticed on your presentation for the meetings, it said 6 in-person, 2 virtual. So you're just going to have people come in 6 people at a time? Is that what that means, or?
No, 6 meetings. 6
No,
meetings.
it's going to be 6 in-person meetings.
Oh,
And
6
then
in-person.
we
Okay,
thought,
sorry, I just
given the-
misunderstood
yeah,
that. Thanks
Given
for
the
that.
weather and geography, that we'd offer the virtual as well.
I have one quick question. You make reference, Ministry of Health contributes approximately 3/4 of the project cost. So that implies 25% is local share?
The local share varies from community to community, and what we have seen when we've done a broad brush analysis of other hospitals in Ontario that have gone through the same process, it is somewhere between 20 and 30%, generally speaking. Again, it depends if the land is available. It depends how the payments are structured through a variety of sources. We're going to be looking very, very closely to our donors. The Huntsville Hospital Foundation has been spectacular during COVID, raising money for the hospital, and we expect to support them in every way. But it's a big number, and it's a lot of money. Healthcare is
That's a big
not
number.
cheap. Yep.
Thank you for that. Councillor Morrison, and then I think we probably should move on.
This is tricky for me, too. And I apologize if this has been said in September, but has there been any discussion on what will be done with the current Huntsville Hospital building? And could it be repurposed for something healthcare related, or even affordable housing, or something along those lines?
So, do you want to go?
No.
So, great question, because we haven't actually, this is what Cheryl and her team are working through now, is to figure out what to do with not only the Huntsville Hospital, but the Bracebridge Hospital and its location, should the hospital move to another spot. So that's part of what we're trying to figure out. I think we're talking about how much it costs. I think there's some real excitement that could be generated by repurposing those buildings and those lands to be another contribution to our community to have some success on a bunch of other challenges that we're seeing. So we're all ears, and the team will be working on that.
Perfect. Thank you both. That was great, really interesting, a lot of information. Thank you. And great questions, Council. Thank you. Okay, with that, we're moving to our second deputation, and I think Pat Dubé and Catherine Crane, but I'm not seeing, they're coming in electronically, maybe? I don't see them. Oh, So they think it's tonight. Is there any chance either of you could do their presentation? You do, you see, I figured you might be able to do that, Cheryl. Okay, all right, we'll sort something out. Our apologies, that's unfortunate. We'll figure that out. Okay, with that, I see Dan is here, and Dan, you're up next, and with respect to the Snow Village. Perfect.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you today. So I think most of you know me. My name is Dan Watson. I'm the Executive Director of the Huntsville Festival of the Arts, and I'm here today to talk about a project that we're doing called Snow Village. So this, I believe a lot of folks around this table may have seen it last year. This would be the second year that we've done it. Really, it's an arts-based snow park that we build in River Mill Park, and it came out of COVID, really. We were looking for different ways that we could still serve the community, still create art in public spaces and offer it to people. And so this was an idea that we were able to do last year. It was very successful, and we're thrilled to be trying to do it again. The tentative dates, weather depending, if we get some snow, January 16th to March 19th. So that would involve us creating and building mid-January and hopefully open by the beginning of February. And then again, weather depending, we could stay going into March. In order to do this, we obviously have to use River Mill Park, and this, according to the schedule of fees that we've been given, that total amount of time the permit fee would be $5,868 plus HST. So we're here today to ask if that money that permit can be waived so that we can provide this. As I said, this is an arts-based snow park, and so it really takes its inspiration. The theme is a walk down Main Street, so it kind of takes its inspiration from the town of Huntsville itself. So last year we created Town Hall, and it had a little slide coming out of it. We had the swing bridge, we had the portage flyer, we had Lions Lookout, which really was just a big pile of snow, but that it was still Lions Lookout, that's what we called it. And then there's also other spaces there that we offer people the opportunity to create themselves. So we have little tools, plastic shovels, formers, spoons and things that people can carve, and prompts about how to make things in the snow. So it's really an invitation for people to get playful and come out and enjoy the outdoors. Included in that, we also have some special events that we like to do. Friday Night Lights, it includes lots of floodlights and little rope lights that illuminate the snow. We have done in the past, on weekends, we offer hot chocolate and play music and have artists on site that can help people create themselves. We're going to be working with the BIA this year to maybe do a snowman making competition and try to get some of the local businesses or organizations to come down and create. And as we did with the Chamber last year, they're planning on some ice sculptures, so that would be as well. And then we are also working with a group of 25 young people to create a play. It's called The Snow Queen. It involves giant puppets and music and songs and things like that to be done outdoors in the park itself. So lots of different opportunities for people to get engaged. Last year, we estimated we had about 4,500 people come through, and so based on a calculation of 600 a week, we think there will be up over 5,000 people that would be using this. As I said, there's lots of opportunity for people, so we engage and we hire both local artists and invited artists to lead the charge on creating it, creating the work, but there's also lots of opportunity for volunteers to come and help us make it, help us maintain it. We saw a lot of students last year. Classes would come down. We facilitated a few classes with local high school came over, and the elementary schools came over, and we showed them some things about how to carve snow, how it works. And so there's lots of different opportunities for people to get involved. Last year, I'm happy to say we didn't have any sort of, injury incidents or anything, and we had some pretty wild weather. At one point in February, it went up to 12 and started melting, and then there was a day of like torrential rain, and so we saw everything. But so we monitor it daily. Our studio is right across from there. We look at it. If something needs to be fixed or even closed off, which we had to do a couple times last year, we do it, and we maintain the park. This year we understand there's a difference. There's no more public washrooms, so we're going to be providing porta potties at some location. We have to decide that with the staff, but where that would be, and we carry $5 million liability insurance as well for that. And last year, the garbage, there wasn't a ton of garbage. We kind of maintained it, but so hopefully that stays true this year. Lots of supporters on this. So we are, I think we're missing the Tim Hortons logo there. Sorry, Tim Hortons. I don't know what happened. Yeah. Blacked out. Anyways, so we work with different partners in different capacities. So Fowler Construction, for example, is able to truck in clean snow. So they bring the clean snow and they dump it out for us. Attainable Solutions, we were able to have a little small bobcat that helped us fill the formers that we make. So we make these big blocks of snow, and then we pull the sides away, and then the artists can have at it. And so it's a really neat, interesting process. And then there's other folks like Tim Hortons who are contributing financially. The BIA has sponsored it as well, and then Lake Bay's the Chamber is offering ice sculptures, and we hope the town of Huntsville will waive those permit fees and as a partner as well. So our total budget for all the stuff is around $40,000. So as I said, the benefits, there's so many different benefits, I think, to this. It's a free event, and you've got lots of different benefits. Yes, it can attract tourism, but also it really serves the local community as well. And we saw a lot of locals come down, mostly families, I have to say, but it's an opportunity in the winter to get out, to play, to meet other people. There's more people coming downtown, and obviously, you see photos like this, and it's helpful with tourism to help to strengthen the Huntsville brand, if you will. So the other part I want to say about this is that Rivermill Park is, it's busy in the summer. In the winter, it's not so busy, and it was really interesting to work there last year. It's rarely, if ever, rented during the winter months, and from what I could see, it was mostly used by dogs and by kids filming TikTok videos. So it was great to see, just by even carving a path in there, we saw people come down and look around and wander and meet people. So that, I think it's a really great example of enlivening an underused piece of public space to do some good. So that's my presentation, and I do want to say thank you very much for having me here. As I said, that the $6,000, the permit fee, while we understand it's a schedule of it comes from daily rental rates, the actual cost to the town, I believe, is quite a lot less than that. So it's not something that's going to be a huge amount of financial burden. The other part is that, as I mentioned, is that it's rarely, if ever, permitted. So it's, in terms of loss of revenue, there's not a huge amount there, I wouldn't believe. So if you weigh that with all of the great things that it can do, I think it's a great investment, and we hope that that council will support it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Dan. And I believe first out of the gate is Councillor Fitzgerald.
It's a race now. Thank you, Your Worship. Dan, thanks for the presentation. I'm always happy to have you here because I know there's going to be something interesting, exciting coming down the pipe. So thanks for your continued efforts in making things happen in coordination with the BIA and the town. I'm happy to support this.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Dan. Thank you so much for coming here today, Dan. The Huntsville Festival of the Arts has been just an incredible organization for our town, and I love seeing the partnerships that are always developed. And I would concur with what Councillor Fitzgerald said. I would also support the motion to waive the fees, the $6,000. But thank you so much for what you do and your volunteers. And I saw the picture of Rudy on there. He's one of your great sculptors. Yes. You'd be dead with everybody. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Dan, thank you. I just wanted to say, I'm also very supportive. I think it does meet a number of the strategic directions of the town. Activating our public realm space is really important. Active, healthy living, really important. Seeing all the kids playing in the space is really cool. So thank you. And as you know, we have a motion for later in the meeting. All right? Okay, thanks. All right, so moving right along, we are going to agenda number 5 with respect to our council minutes. And I do have a motion moved by Councillor Cloutier and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that the following council meeting minutes be adopted as printed and circulated. Regular Council, November 7th, 2022. Inaugural Council, November 21st, 2022. Special Council, November 28th, 2022. Special Council, November 29th, 2022. Are there any questions or comments around any of those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you for that. And we have 2 reports for information only. Reports 6.1.1, Huntsville Public Library Board, October 11, 2022, and 6.1.2, Downtown Huntsville BIA, November 14th, 2022. Are there any questions with respect to those reports? Okay. Councillor Stone.
Well, I just want to touch on the BIA.
All right, if you'd like, for sure.
Thank you. So this will be my last BIA report.
Okay.
Councillor Renwick will be taking over from me after this point. Not much to report. There's lots of great Christmas shopping in the downtown core, but the one thing I wanted to mention was we had anticipated that there would be a big light-up Christmas present arch to go into Kent Park. And apparently there was a mix-up with the supplier. That is still coming, probably won't be up till next year, but I just wanted to note that it is not up, and that's why.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Thank you very much for that. And I apologize for not giving you the opportunity right out of the gate. Oh, man. But thanks for that update. Great. All right, so we are going to move right along. Agenda item number 7, reports from municipal officers. And Reva's sitting there waiting in the wings. And Julia, are you joining? I think so. With this most excellent presentation coming up, the budget training. All right, with that, over to you too. And this is a long one. I wonder, should we have the 5-minute? Do people want it? No. It's just, no. Like a bathroom break? No. Okay. All right. We're just following up on another item before you two start. Just 2 seconds. Are you, oh, so we're still waiting for that? Okay, oh, okay. A long time. Very, very thorough. Okay, is this going to be up to 5 minutes? Should I allow for a 5-minute bathroom break? No, it's going to be not quite. Okay, all right, very quick. I just thought I'd ask. 5 minutes? 5-minute bathroom break? Or should I not call it 5-minute bathroom break? All right, good. Ian, is that good? Okay, welcome back, everybody. We've had a slight switch of plan. We were all ready with the budget discussion, and then Catherine showed up. So we're just deviating just a little bit for a few moments. We have Catherine Crane here from the Huntsville Hospital Foundation, and you're going to do the overview with respect to the waiving of fee request. All right. Thank you.
So, is that on? Okay, thanks. So I wanted to thank you for waiting for me for a few minutes. Thank goodness we live in a small town and I could buzz across pretty quickly. We are having some very exciting times right now at the hospital, and some things you know about, some things you'll learn about soon, but we are growing as a foundation due to that. We have a lot of projects coming up that we will be expected to raise millions and millions of dollars. 4 years ago, you may remember, and hopefully you haven't been at the hospital, but if you have, you'll see this really cool building that is opposite the parking lot, and that's the foundation office. So 4 years ago, Pat Dubé, who's on our board and owner of Greystone, helped us to make that our office. And it's unconventional for sure, but we needed a location that was visible for everyone in the community so that we could help raise money and help raise awareness of what we do. So we had over 20 businesses in town help us build we call it the bunkie. It just has never left us because the hospital's the mothership and we're the bunkie. So we built that bunkie, and we're so lucky. Monty was actually one of the donors who helped us build that. And so when we moved into that office 4 years ago, there were 4 staff. We're now up to 6 and likely will be at 7 or 8 in the next couple of years. So we've outgrown the trailer, the bunkie, and we're putting an addition on. Greystone is there as we speak, again providing their in-kind donation of all of their work, their labor, and their materials to dig a hole. We've gotten a permit from the town, and they're starting today. So it's pretty exciting. We call it the Capital Redevelopment 2.0, so it's our little bunkie that's redeveloping. We paid a fee of $1,500 for the permit, and we are just asking you, and through you, if we would be able to have that waived on behalf of the Hospital Foundation.
Thank you for that brief presentation. And are there any questions, comments from council? I don't see any. It's pretty straightforward. So,
is, yeah.
Thank you for coming
You're
in a last-minute
Yeah.
effort. And
Thank you.
for accommodating us. That's
Yeah, and
great.
congratulations, everyone who is on council.
And we do, Catherine, we have a motion later in the meeting. to
That's
deal with
fine.
that,
I'll
okay?
be back at the office if you need me. I
Okay.
can be here in 2 minutes.
All right, 2 minutes. Good to know, good to know. Thank you. All right, with that, Reva, Julia, we're really excited for this next part.
Who wouldn't
Aren't
be
we
excited about budget?
Really very excited. All had a bathroom break, everything. Okay, over to you two. And apologies about the video, but it's just issues with the IT today. Stuff. Okay.
All right. So we would like to thank council for giving us this opportunity to provide this overview. A couple of years ago, I actually interviewed all the council members and asked them about the budget process and what we could kind of do differently. And there was quite a few council members that did say that they would like training ahead of the budget process so that, they weren't dealing with the numbers at the same time they were trying to learn everything. So we're excited to have this chance to do that for you. So we have several items that we want to cover this morning, as you can see from this agenda. We're speaking to many of these at a high level. We did, however, feel it's great to have all this information right in the presentation so that you can use this as a reference document over the next 4 years. We'll also have a pause between each of the topics to allow for any questions that you may have. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions as we go along. And if we don't have the answers today, we'll make sure that we get them to you as soon as we can. So legislative framework. The legislative framework consists of legislation, regulations, and bylaws. The primary act of all municipalities in Ontario is the Ontario Municipal Act. This act is a framework document for municipal government and provides a foundation for municipal powers, structures, and governance. As you can see, there are many other acts and regulations that help guide the decisions of council. This is just a handful of the number of acts that regulations that make up our legislative framework for Huntsville. And these ones are ones that are primarily used by the finance department on a day-to-day basis. So town policies and bylaws are approved by council. Staff use these policies and bylaws every day to carry out the operations of the town. This list of town policies and bylaws is by no means exhaustive. This list represents many of the commonly used policies and bylaws that financial services use. And we won't go through each of them, but in addition to this list, there are also many motions of council that impact the operations of the town. For example, many motions have been passed for what reserves are set up and what they can be used for. There's also a motion of council that gives direction for staff to use CPI trim as the primary inflation indicator when setting budgets, providing for staff and council remuneration and annual lease increases. And we'll focus on a few of these throughout the orientation. Oh, so stop there.
Okay, so this is our first opportunity for questions. I noticed you do this throughout the whole presentation. It's amazing. It's quite good. Councillor Armour? No? Okay.
Sorry, Worship. Hold on.
Okay. I think we're good to go. Next
Okay.
section.
So next is our favorites topic. We're quite often asked why we need to set such high insurance requirements when we perform all of our activities. It's important to note that the town's insurance costs are a very significant budget item. Over 5% of the levy collected is solely used to pay for insurance premiums. And any increases can have a significant impact on the levy and reduce the funds that we have to provide other services. So we recently completed the RFP for our insurance program and have awarded it to BFL Canada. In a future meeting, BFL will probably come here as well and have their own orientation with this group. So you can look forward to that in the future. So why is municipal insurance different? There's only a handful of insurers in the municipal market, making municipal insurance at times difficult to secure. And in addition to that, there's actually only 3 brokers that deal with municipal insurance in Ontario. Municipalities are responsible for providing a wide variety of services to the community that require different insurance policies. We do road and sidewalk inspections and maintenance, winter snow clearing, parks and trail maintenance, recreation facilities and programs, and building inspections, et cetera. And interesting to note, building inspections is one of our highest contributors to our insurance program. Joint and several liability, I'm not sure if you've heard of this before, is where we only need to be found 1% responsible, and then we could be responsible for up to 100% of the cost. This is in conjunction with municipalities being perceived as having deep pockets and can result in municipalities footing the bill for someone else's primary negligence. So how do we mitigate risk? We have internal risk management practices and policies. We try to transfer our risk through contracts for different events, that kind of thing, or vendors. And we also have an external insurance requirement policy. And this policy provides staff with the guidance on what insurance levels and what type of insurance to get for different situations.
Okay, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Just a quick question. So you say there's only 3 providers. Do we shop around annually, or does the prices usually stay the same across the province?
So we actually, with our insurance policy, we don't just have one insurance policy. Our insurance policy is made up of our program is made up of about 12 policies, 12 different policies. So they do shop around. So our broker would shop around for that and try and, some insurers are actually getting out of municipal markets. So some municipalities last year actually had to have up to have maybe 4 different insurers on one policy. because it's so tight. And just recently, we've experienced a lot of difficulty getting cyber insurance. And I remember when we first got cyber insurance, they were trying to sell it to us, and we were trying to decide whether to get it. And I think it was around $8,000 for $5 million, and now we're up to $58,000 for $1 million, $2 million.
And that's presumably because the risk is so high,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Wow, what a switch, eh? Sorry. Councillor Clark?
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Alcock. Can you just repeat, there was something I heard, I think it was, what was the total percentage of the tax levy that goes towards the insurance premiums? Can you just
Yep.
repeat that?
Yep, it's about 5% of the levy goes towards insurance premiums. We're almost at
Almost $1 million.
$1 million for our policy.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
I think we're good to move on. I know that's crazy, eh?
We put the doom and gloom at the beginning.
I know,
And off on a
exactly.
really happy note.
Oh. It does. All right.
Okay, so the town's procurement bylaw was revised in 2021 and is in place to maintain the integrity of the insurance process, to ensure fairness, objectivity, and transparency of the process, to ensure that the town obtains the best quality of goods, services, or construction at the least possible cost, and to incorporate sustainability where possible. The bylaw itself outlines various competitive and non-competitive methods that the town can utilize. Competitive methods can include requests for tender, requests for proposal, requests for quotation, and we also have vendor of records agreements. Non-competitive methods can include single or sole sourcing. We also, as I mentioned at a previous meeting, have various cooperative procurement methods in place, such as CANU, LAS, OCM, collaborative procurement, et cetera. And at time to time, we also will partner with other municipalities on procurement. The procurement bylaw clearly lays out in section 4.3 of the approval authority limits for staff, managers, directors, and the CAO. The bylaw also details the roles and responsibility of those involved in the procurement process, as well as the segregation of duties. Staff do use this policy as the primary tool when making decisions around purchasing. It's important for all of our new council members to note that council participating in the procurement process is strictly prohibited, with the one exception of selecting the town's auditor. This is in place to ensure that any procurement with the town is free from political interference, whether it's in fact or appearance. So council does set the budget for purchasing through the annual budget process, and if there are significant variances that require council approval to proceed, council will be asked for a recommendation for the approval to spend, but will not be asked to provide a recommendation on the vendor selection. I just also wanted to note that just with procurement, we're fully electronic, and any member of the public can view any of the tenders that are on there at any time on our website.
I'm not seeing any hands, so carry on.
All right, so next is reserve and obligatory funds. So we do have a fairly robust reserve policy, and we have attached that to the agenda. This policy governs the establishment and maintenance of municipal reserves and obligatory reserve funds as a financial tool for the town. This policy also establishes guidelines for maintaining adequate levels of reserve balances to mitigate current and future risk. For example, the Working Fund Reserve has set targets for maintaining this fund at no less than 5% and no more than 20% of budgeted operating expenditures for the current year. Sorry. And so you'll see here just how they've been broken out between the general reserves and the obligatory reserves. So these aren't all of them, these are just some examples of some. So this is just a snapshot over the past several years of what the historical reserve balances have been. So these are just the reserves, not the obligatory reserves. So these are funds that are held for future use. The reserves funds are held at the discretion of council and are utilized at the discretion of council. Most of the reserve funds have council-approved resolutions as to what these funds can be used for. So you'll see right there at the end of 2021, the balance is sitting about over $18 million. Asset replacement reserves, and this isn't all of them, I just kind of gave a snapshot just so you kind of see the different types of reserves that we have in there. These are all set aside for the purpose of replacing our existing assets. And we use these to smooth out potentially uneven nature of non-routine asset replacement from year to year and to plan for sustainable funding for the town's asset management plan. The next one is project reserves. So these are reserves established for the purpose of funding a significant future expense or a series of expenditures, deferrals of projects the next fiscal year, et cetera. Or it could be a reserve that tracks financial performance of a specific functional area. So the next is tax stabilization reserves, and these are established for the purpose of smoothing out cyclical variances due to the nature of certain town-run programs. So in here, we've got our tax stabilization reserve, our insurance, building department, and human capital. And lastly, we have our working fund reserve, and this is established to provide sufficient cash flow for annual operations and to eliminate the requirement to enter into temporary in-year borrowing. So I know you can't see it on here, but it has been provided as an attachment. So this is our year-end, our schedule of all of our reserves at the end of 2021. We'll have an update for you early in 23 for the 22 balances. But you'll see we're sitting at a balance of about $18 million. These reserves don't have a separate bank account, with the exception of the Forbes Hill Reserve. All others do not, sorry. These all do not have a separate bank account, and they don't accrue interest, with the exception of the Forbes Hill Reserve. We use the interest on these balances to reduce the net levy. So next is the obligatory reserve balances. So this is the Canada Community Building Fund, which was formerly the federal gas tax. So they've changed the name on that one. So we refer to that now as the CCBF. There's the parkland fees, that's the in lieu fees that we collect, parking, and then the development charges. So this is the historical balances of that. These are funds that are created by legislation, which stipulate that revenues generated for special purposes be segregated from the general revenue of the municipalities. So all earnings from these investments must form part of the obligatory reserve fund. So these are put in separate bank accounts, and the interest that is earned do go back into those funds.
I was taking notes. So, questions? Anybody? Reserves, for sure. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Julia, the numbers there of the 18 million, are there target numbers that we're trying to reach? And if so, are we above those targets? Are we below those targets?
So we've only set targets for certain reserve funds. We do have targets for the capital asset reserves, which are significantly underfunded. Whereas there's some other ones that do have funds that haven't been specifically allocated for something, such as the Forbes Hill Reserve. And then we also have the Center Street Environmental Reserve. So we don't actually have a project attached to those yet, but that's still to come.
Great. Councillor Armour.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, along the same lines, so if we have a reserve that's short, can we steal from one reserve to the other reserve to bump it up?
We do that from time to time, especially with the capital asset reserve funds. We actually had the fleet reserve, which was in a massive deficit of over $1 million for quite some time, and we actually, at the end of last year, moved some money into that from our surplus. So we do, from time to time, have to go into negative balances.
Reva.
Through your worship, I just want to note too, though, so staff don't have the ability to move those numbers around. It all has to come back through council and get approval through a motion or resolution.
I'm so glad you clarified that. I was just all of a sudden, oh yeah, moving this over here. Oh, Councillor Renwick?
Through you, Your Worship. Thank you, ladies. So the project reserves have been allocated through council. So there are a few in here that have not, really, they don't have projects attached to them. Is that correct? I'm looking at the council chamber expansion. That's something that was discussed, and council has allocated funds towards it, but nothing has happened with it yet, correct? All right. There's a few in there. And if I may follow up on one question, being new, the Forbes Hill expansion, or Forbes Hill, could you just refresh, I know where it is, but what's the reserve project that's with that? Or the reserve fund project?
3 years, so that is one that was, it was created when we sold the University of Waterloo building.
Okay, right.
So that got put into a reserve, and there is not a project that's specifically attached to that.
We're holding on to those dollars tightly. But, and I'm glad you clarified, the Center Street is the environmental fund also. We keep adding to that one because of the long-term objective.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a video that's attached to the presentation here, but we're not able to play it for you today. So we'll send that out to council so that they can. They're 3-minute videos, and they're really great because they're just in very simple terms. And so we hope that you'll all look at them after the meeting. You'll also see on the agenda there's another report on Bill 23, which has significant impact on the development charges. So I won't get into that here. We'll get into that later at the next. So the following are services that are specific to the town of Huntsville that we collect development charges for. So administration, studies, libraries, fire, indoor recreation, outdoor recreation, and roads and related. Oh. And sorry, this would all make more sense if we'd watched the video first, but, so if we have any questions, I'll go through it. Ineligible services, we've got town hall, tourism, hospitals, vehicle and equipment, and computer equipment. So we cannot collect development charges for any of these purposes as is outside of the Act. The town's development charge background study outlines the projects that have been included to be done over the next several years. And these are specific to each of the types of areas that were listed as eligible services. Another important item to note with development charges is that there's 2 types of exemptions. There's statutory exemptions and non-statutory exemptions. So when council approves non-statutory exemptions, like if they're granting to somebody to waive the development charges, we actually have to make that DC whole. So that means that we would actually have to find another funding for that and then put that money into the development charge fund. So it's just important to note that even when we do waive things, the tax levy will have to support that cost.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, just along that same point you just mentioned with Bill 23, how's that with the development charges on that? How's that going to affect us going forward if we have to backfill the development charges we aren't charging?
I don't think they've quite, I don't know if they've clarified that 100%, but my understanding is that if it's a statutory exemption, then we would not have to make it whole. That's the stance that we've taken on any statutory.
That would seem incredibly unfair, but then the whole bill is unfair, so there we go. But it would seem a bit odd if they force us to waive something and then have to find, anyway, just an opinion. Councillor Stone.
Thank you. So at the district, we talked about development charges, and development charges right now are discounted here in Muskoka at 50%. Is that correct?
I have to.
So this would help us, having already been doing this. I think Bill 23 talks about 60%?
I believe it's, for Bill 23, you have to phase in the increase. But right now, we're not, right now in our study, we're not doing the full DC, and I'm trying to remember what the percentage is, because we have a different percentage for industrial than we do for the residential one. but I think it's at 60%, but we'll get that information for you. But in our next DC study, then we would have to phase that in, so over time, you wouldn't charge the full amount in the first year, you have to phase it in over the period of time.
But we're already discounting it.
Yeah,
We are. Yep.
Right.
yeah.
Thanks.
Nope. Okay. You're free to move on.
What did I miss? Oh, right. Okay, so the next is investments. So municipalities can either invest in the legal list, or it can invest in prudent investor. And the legal list is a very prescribed list of particular classes of investments that can be invested in. The prudent investment standard was introduced through municipal act that allowed for the creation of the one joint investment board. Huntsville, along with Bracebridge and the District of Muskoka, was part of a group of other Ontario municipalities that were founding members of this board. And at the beginning of 2022, the board had over $2.9 billion in pooled assets. So this is just a snapshot of our prudent investment statement at the end of 2021. And there's also, if you have time, there's a little podcast in there with from the town of Bracebridge, as they were founding members as well, which is quite good. And just talks about how, it's allowing municipalities to join together and have some synergies and a lot more power to get into these kinds of investments. So each year, so this is just a snapshot at the end of 2021, and each year in the spring, we will bring back a report with a statement for the town's investments for the year and how the investments performed in the balances. And this year is a very good year to remind council that we invest over the long term. There will be ebbs and flows and earnings, ebbs and flows in the values and earnings each year. And 2021 and 22 will be prime examples of some significant ebbs and flows.
Questions? Nope. I don't think so.
Okay. So grants and other funding. So this is a snapshot of various one-time grants or grants that have been applied for over the last couple of years. And this is just a handful of ones that we've applied for. Staff continually reach out to seek out grant opportunities and apply for them when appropriate. And quite often, if we apply for them and we need to come back, and we would come back afterwards and make sure that we have council approval to proceed with that. This page here, it outlines all of the one-time or all the ongoing grants that the town currently receives. And I have actually put links into each of these, so you can go on and look at the actual web pages to see kind of different projects that have been used. The primary one that we have here, or the largest one, is the OMPF, which is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, and that's basically a transfer payment from the government, from the provincial government. We also have the CCBF. That's used for infrastructure, and we get around $600,000 for that every year. And then we also have the OCIF fund, and that's also used for infrastructure, primarily for transportation infrastructure. We also have the MTO gas tax for public transit, and that helps offset the costs of the public or transit funding. And then we have our Seniors Active Living Center funding, and that's we use that over at the Canada Summit Center to offset programs over there. We also have the Community Museums Operating Grant, which is an ongoing fund for MHP to continue with their collection, and the Public Library Operating Grant.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment, those links don't work on the,
Oh, they
on
don't,
the slide.
okay.
Oh, yeah, wouldn't mind
send
looking.
it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Quick question, Julia, the application-based grants, have we been consistent over the last decade as to the number that we apply for, or have we been ratcheting it up in the last few years?
I would say over, especially with COVID, there was a lot of grants that were thrown our way. So we did
You
apply
applied
for a
like
lot of them, yeah.
That's what I wondered, and do you think now that will taper off? Or are we just going to continue to see what we can do?
I think we had a meeting with Ron Beijing from FedNor.
Yep.
And he was indicating that he thinks that they'll start moving away from the tourism, that kind of thing, because they were really focused on tourism and getting people back in and, that kind of programs, moving away from that a little bit, he thinks. So I think they will start to taper off. And I think what we've seen that we haven't been successful as many in the last, probably in the last years. We have been the 2 years before that.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, I don't think there are any other questions, so moving right along.
I should add just on the grants that there was a period of time, I think nobody wanted to give money to Huntsville because we got such a large chunk of money in 2010. Okay, so another favorite topic, debt and debentures. So debt is borrowed money that needs to be paid back, usually with interest later. It's important to note that municipal debt is not a revenue tool, but it's an important capital financing tool. It can be used for things like, for funding things like capital projects for rehabilitating a bridge or rehabilitating a community pool, that kind of thing. We do have the ability to borrow on a short-term basis as well, and we do have a line of credit for that. We are able to increase our debt, but it has to be within this annual repayment limit, which is the ARL. And the province does set what that amount is, so it's the amount of money that we can be putting in our budget as a payment. So that would include our principal and interest payments. Right now, our ARL is at 4.6 million, so that would be about, we could take on another $48 million in debt. So here's the snapshot of our debt balances, which I think is pretty exciting. It just shows how we haven't had any new debt since 2010, since the G8. And as you can see, the balance is set to decline with no debt in 2030. Paid off in 2030. So each year we get asked when debt will fall off, so specifically which ones will fall off. So here is a listing of when they will end. So this is the last year that we would have payments. So in 2023, this will be the last year that we're paying for the town hall and the theater project. And then in 2024, we won't have to have that debenture payment in there in the budget. So again, debt is a tool that we can use for capital purchases, and there are pros and cons for issuing debt. One thing to reiterate is that debt is a financing tool, not a funding tool. So when we do issue debt, the levy is required to increase to pay for the debenture interest and the related interest.
Well, that was pretty exciting, that section come on, 2030, really exciting. Yes, Councillor Harmer.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one. So at the end of '23, we're going to have a party at the theater. Mortgage paid off.
We should.
I think we should.
We should. Anyone else? No? Okay. Moving right along.
Okay, so I'm up. So we're going to talk about the municipal accommodation tax, or MAT for short. Okay, so the municipal accommodation tax was a new financial tool for municipalities that was provided through the Transient Accommodation Regulation, or OREG 435-17. Don't worry, I won't be testing you on these. So Huntsville actually passed a bylaw in 2019. It's our bylaw 2019-123. That allows Huntsville to implement a 4% mandatory MAT tax on all accommodations for under 30 days. So this graph is showing the breakdown of what's been collected between both the short-term rental providers and all others, so hotels, motels, lodges, inns, bed and breakfasts, over the past 4 years since it was implemented. So there are currently 2 different reserve accounts for these 2 funds, our short-term rental MAT and our general MAT for hotels, motels, that kind of thing. I think it really is important to note that these funds can be used for similar purposes that are set out in our MAT budget principles policy. So there is specific financial policy related to the MAT funds. So in total, over the past 4 years, the town has collected over $4 million in municipal accommodation tax and has distributed over half of that, so $2.5 million to, you'll hear it referenced as the HMATA board. It's the Huntsville Municipal Accommodation Tax Association. So they are a designated tourism entity, and we have to provide at least 50% of our MAT funds to them that we collect every year. So we have provided more than the 50% to them over the last 4 years. I think it's really interesting to note that the majority of time that the MAT tax has been collected, we were in a global pandemic. So, 2020, 2021, 2022, we collected over $4 million in MAT tax. So. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Stone.
Thanks. I think it's important for everyone to understand how much goes to HMATA. I know we have to give at least 50%, but we give more. And we also keep a portion. Can you describe the differences between the two and the percentages?
Yeah, so we provide kind of, as a pool, we have to provide over 50%. So the calculation for that is done a certain way based on the percentage of what we collect from the hotels and motels. But you need to think of the MAT as an overall pool of money. And I think when we look at our agreement with HMATA, we do need to look at our funding calculation. The reason it was set up that way initially was because the short-term rental MAT that program hadn't really started when that came. So I think that's kind of a misconception, is that HMAT is only getting the hotel and motel MAT. That's not really the case. That's just how it's calculated. So with the portion that the town collects and keeps, they do go into dedicated MAT reserves that can be used to fund tourism-related costs. So one of the main projects that was budgeted in 2022 was a wayfinding signage. There was things to promote, tourism and bringing people into Huntsville, right? So those are the projects that we use to fund that through our MAT reserves. Does that kind of answer your question?
Follow-up?
I just think it's really important that everybody knows what HMATA does. Mm-hmm. They have this pot of money and they have a board. So an organization that wants to throw an event, they're not supposed to come here. They're supposed to go to HMATA first and ask them for some funding to do their tourism attraction or whatever's bringing tourists to Huntsville. And HMATA talks a lot about heads in beds, but it's more about driving tourism to Huntsville.
Appreciate your saying that. I just, to follow up on that, so Riva, it's a bit muddy now though, right? Because you're saying originally it was for the hotels, the hotel tax, and then short-term rentals, we brought that on. And there was a particular funding formula with respect to the original that had guidelines that you talked about, heads and beds. But our own short-term rental, we don't have those guidelines that are as clear as the other, and yet the two are sort of merging?
So it helps to look at the MAT as one program, not hotels and motels separate from short-term rentals.
Right.
We collect MAT.
All of it, right.
And we provide at least 50% to HMATA.
Right.
The way that we calculate the amount was originally based on, because the short-term rental MAT program hadn't quite started yet.
Right.
It was based on the hotels and motels because that's what we knew at the time. So that's something that I think will be revisited once we look at the agreement. But yeah, it is one big pool of MAT money. So HMATA is getting money not just from hotels and motels, but from short-term rental providers as well.
Right.
It's just the way that we calculate the dollar amount.
Right.
So they're kind of two separate.
It's still somewhat muddy though, right? Like we still need clarification moving forward, I think.
Yes.
I think that's what I'm hearing anyway. Yes, Julia?
I think it's important to note too that the policy that Riva referred to I can't remember what it's called,
The financial.
the budget principles policy. It applies to that whole fund. It doesn't separate out between,
The two,
yeah.
okay. All right, that's good. Councillor Renwick?
Thank
and
you, Your
maybe-
Worship. Sorry, do you see eventually that those two funds will be in the same pot and that it'll just be under the same regulations to be able to use it? Like right now we're, it's showing as two separate entities, but eventually it'll be in the same one because it, yeah. Mhm.
So that would be a council decision.
Okay.
But I do know that it still is a pilot project, I believe, and there is an agreement that ends, so that could be revisited once that ends in 2023.
Just a quick comment on that, and I know that we're not discussing that right now, but there's need for further discussion, because I think if you start blending it, then you're looking at the goals of the hoteliers versus our goals. And they may not be exactly the same with respect to this currently second pot, if you know what I mean. But it's for a greater discussion, I'm sure, at a later date. Yes, Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, and we'll have that discussion in way deeper detail later. My question is this an ongoing agreement, or is it something that has to be renewed on an annual or semi-annual basis? And if so, when are we due to renew it again?
So the collection of the mat, I believe, is a permanent bylaw. It has no end date, I believe. The legislation that allows us to collect the mat is ongoing. It's part of our legislation, so there's no reason that we would have to quit collecting the mat. So you do have to have at least 50% allocated, as Reva said, to a designated tourism entity, and that's right in the legislation. If we weren't providing it to HADMATA, you would have to provide it to another organization. But with that agreement, that one does end in, I believe, 2023. And Director Maxwell can correct me if I'm wrong.
Does the agreement end in 2023? And if so, maybe when? Yes, perfect. We don't have the when, but we,
We have the
yes,
same stay.
perfect. That's excellent. Thank you, Director Maxwell. All right, should we move on? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the financial information return. So generally, when somebody asks me what is a financial information return, I equate it to the tax return for a corporation, right? We don't pay taxes. It's an information return that we fill out at the end of the year with our financial statements, and it details a whole host of information, our revenues, our expenses. There's some statistical information that we provide with respect to building permits and staffing levels and, structural fires. And there's a whole host of information that goes into this. It's something that we have to fill out every year. Generally, we do it in conjunction with the audit because we have to submit our audited financial statements along with it. And it provides information on the previous fiscal year, and it's, January to December. So any information for all of the 444 municipalities in Ontario can be found on this website. And I don't know if it's clickable in the specific PowerPoint, but we can provide the link to you guys. There is now a tool that allows for various reports and queries for each municipality to compare with any of the municipalities or groups of municipalities. So you'll see later on in the presentation, we've included some graphs that have been generated right out of this site. So Huntsville has organized their chart of accounts to follow the provincial standard and the information that's required in the FIR. So not only do we group our accounts by type of expense, but we also break it down by function as well. So things like general government, protective services, transportation, recreation and culture services. When you're looking through the town's budget, some common expense or common object codes are used across departments. So town-wide, we can see the spending for various types of expenses. So things like fuel, office supplies, consulting, and legal fees. So having these standardized codes allow for the FIR to be completed more efficiently. Any questions on that one?
I'm not seeing any questions. You can move right along.
Okay, so property assessments. So what is MPAC? MPAC's role is to accurately assess and classify all properties in Ontario. All property owners must go through MPAC for any changes to their assessments, and the town is independent of this role. Each year around this time, MPAC will deliver us a roll book. It's actually a physical book, and it can be found on the second floor counter. This book is publicly viewable, but it cannot be reproduced. So any information on any property in Huntsville can be viewed here. It's important, and again, we'll have another video that's really great, and I will share that because I think it really provides a really simplified view of property taxes and how it works, so I really encourage you to look at it. But it is important to note that annual property assessment increases are revenue neutral. This means they have no impact on the total property tax amount that a municipality must raise. That's an important thing to note. The changes provide for a redistribution of property taxes within a municipality based on the value of the property owned and the levy that's required. So it's important to note that there's a big misconception that people think when their assessment goes up, that their taxes will automatically go up by the same amount, and that's not accurate. It doesn't happen that way. So what's important to note here is that there's currently a blip in the regular assessment cycle due to COVID-19. A new assessment date of 2020 was originally planned, and there was some significant increases that were being noted to come our way, in particular in our area, in particular on waterfront properties. However, this was put to a halt at that time, and since then, each update has been delayed. At this point, the natural, most efficient step for them, which we would expect, is for the province to continue with an update in 2024, because now we're in the last year of the cycle. So we're already 3 years into it. So we're hoping that in 2024, we will get a new assessment base, because we're still using the 2016 numbers. So if they do that, the number that we'll be using is the 2020 numbers. At this time, the province has not postponed or announced proceeding with this update. So MPAC's patiently waiting by to see what the province dictates. So it's not a decision of MPAC on whether they proceeded, it's actually a decision of the province. I did have a quick video there, but we'll have to send that along.
Okay, and no question. Oh, Councillor Stone.
So just to be clear, when MPAC finally, since 2016, finally comes around to reassess the properties, what's the real impact of that on properties and their taxes? Will there be none, or will all of a sudden these properties now are assessed at double the value?
So I don't know the exact impact on it, but I do know when they were going to do it in 2020, they were looking at a double-digit increase for Huntsville. So that was in 20.
And what's the trickle down to the homeowner? What does that mean?
So I do encourage you to watch that video, because it really explains how assessment impacts what the actual property tax bill is. But if everybody's tax bill, or if everybody's assessment goes up by the same amount, then we kept the levy the same, we would actually be reducing the tax rates.
Right. Right.
So,
Councillor Clark.
Some of that is probably controlled by mill rates, right? So I think there would be have to be an adjustment done with the mill rate to
Right.
compensate for, so that people aren't,
All of a sudden,
right, getting a huge surprise, right?
isn't that exactly?
Yeah,
The-
and we do have data, I can't remember how far back, for our tax rates, where there actually has been decreases in tax rates.
Yeah. You know what, Julie, if you can send out the link
Yeah.
to that would be really fantastic, because you're right, it's a really important thing for
Yeah.
all of us to get.
and I think with this
Maybe it's just
specific video, there is a link on our Town of Huntsville website in our property tax page, so that taxpayers can actually see how property taxes really work, because it isn't just the assessment, it's also the levy and the tax rates that affect how much dollar amount that the taxes actually are for each person.
Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Corey, Councillor Clark, in mine's experience, I'm sure how many times have you helped people with requests for reconsideration, right? It happens a lot. The danger when MPAC does these big increases is that if there's 10 people on a street and 5 people's properties go up by 30%, and then the other 5 only go up by 5%, and they misdiagnose or misassess some of the properties, it becomes unfair to some of the locals. So as a councillor, if that does happen, if you get phone calls on it, I encourage you to encourage them to have a request for reconsideration. I've done one myself once, because sometimes they miss it and they're doing their best, but it becomes unfair to some of our citizens for sure.
Yes, Julia.
And just to add to that, it was interesting because I sign off on the, I can't remember what they're called, the appeals notices when they finalize them. And I thought, I haven't had any for so long, but I realized it was because we haven't had an assessment update. So once we do that, we'll have a lot more requests for, because I don't know if we even had like a handful of them
Like
this year. And
maybe a
usually there's hundreds of them. So it'll be interesting again to see what happens with this new update.
And if we get hundreds of those requests, then that presumably, you have one person that's dealing just with that, or is it a minimal amount of?
Those are all done through MPAC.
MPAC, oh,
Yeah.
they're all MPAC, right,
Yeah.
right, okay, gotcha. Right, okay. You said we, all right, good, thanks.
Sorry, I should say, I only sign off on the minutes of settlements for some
Right,
bigger
that,
ones.
and that's what I
Go
was,
to the
I
ARB,
think
yeah.
that's why I was, okay.
So asset management plan. So municipalities own and maintain nearly 60% of Canada's core public infrastructure. And in the past, government spending on public infrastructure was reducing, which created significant differences in what was being spent on infrastructure and what was being required to maintain these assets and keep these levels of service. This is creating the funding gap. And Huntsville has been actively increasing the levels of funding for infrastructure through the annual budget process to reduce this funding gap. It should be recognized that the funding that is provided for in the levy each year is less than what is required to maintain these assets. So we do need to keep increasing it year after year. And our plan to reduce the funding gap is over a period of about 20 years. I did think it was really interesting in the previous presentation this morning about the local share, the comment that was made about, imagine if we had put money aside when the hospital was first built. And this is exactly what we're trying to avoid at the town. So we keep putting money aside and we keep pushing that through the budget. And our previous councils have been great at continuing to do that. So when we do need to replace that asset, we do have money in the bank to do it. And we don't have to discontinue those services. And again, I have another little video that we'll send out.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. I should be looking around. So, carry on. I love the Barack Obama quote. That's great.
Okay, so yeah, I also really enjoyed this quote. So a budget is more than just a series of numbers on a page. It's an embodiment of our values. And you can see this quote in our last few budget books that we've done over the last few years. And really, when we're putting together a budget, just like a lot of you saw when we were doing our council speed dating session, the budget really is a puzzle. And, you know, our values and our, you know, what council's initiatives and, you know, what we're legislated to do and all of the programs and services that we offer, really all of that goes into the budget and creating that budget. Okay, so the operating budget. So things like annual costs to deliver the services and to maintain, so repairs and maintenance costs and that kind of thing, to maintain the infrastructure that we have, all go into the operating budget. Things like wages and benefits, utilities, fuels, repairs and maintenance, contractors, all of those things go into our operating budget. It covers the day-to-day costs of maintaining and providing the services that we offer. The capital budget, on the other hand, is any new infrastructure or renewal of existing infrastructure. Things like master plans and studies and that kind of stuff go into our capital budget. And generally, these projects could span over a number of years. So a great example is Streetscape, right? That was a huge capital project that was undertaken. So again, the capital budget covers new development and construction of new assets or rebuilding of existing assets. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. But this is just to show sort of where money can come from, right? So we've got development charge revenue. So as Julia mentioned earlier when we chatted about development charges, we can use development charges to fund growth-related infrastructure projects. Things like capital grants and external contributions, so donations, and we see a lot of sort of one-time grants that we can apply for to help fund these infrastructure projects. Reserve funds or savings, right? As Julia mentioned, with the reserve funds, those are, there might be specific capital project things. We did have a streetscape reserve specifically for that project. And then things like property tax, user fees, external revenues and grants, all of those things, a lot of those go into our operating budget. And with respect to property tax, there is a portion of the levy that relates to capital. So that's what we save to put into those capital reserves so that we can use that money for the capital projects that we need to do later on. And there is a copy of the budget and financial controls policy is attached to the presentation. So it's quite a lengthy document and very detailed. So I encourage you all to review.
Just along that lines with that policy, at the very back of it, there's actually 2 flow charts which summarize how a lot of the things in the document. So I would encourage you, if you're not going to read the whole policy, just to at least read the last 2 pages because it's a good reference document.
Okay, so this is outlining a lot of budget pressures that we deal with on a regular basis. So municipalities aren't actually allowed to run deficits like provincial or federal levels of government. We have to have a balanced budget every year. So things like economic trends, municipal contracts, growth has been a big one in Huntsville for the last few years. Implementing strategic plan goals, resources and personnel requirements. Any new or enhanced or upgrades, enhancements to the programs or services that we offer. And our asset management has been a big one over the last few years. We did, as Julia mentioned, adopt the asset management plan back in 2020. And we have been working towards saving more money towards our future infrastructure projects. So we are trying to reduce that funding gap so that when we need to spend the money, we have it. Okay, so this is a breakdown of a property tax bill. So, assuming an average assessed residential home at $381,000, this is where the tax dollars go. So about 1/3 of it is Town of Huntsville taxes. Just over 50% relates to district and district services. So the general district levy, water, sewer, and waste management. So that's over 50% of a tax goes to the district. And then 13% is education. So that goes to the province for, school boards. Okay. So again, there was a video there. It's a really great video, and we'll send a link out. And it really explains sort of in non-financial terms, how does a municipal budget really work? Okay. So this is actually showing the net levy by division. It does exclude the COVID-19 budget because it's a one-time sort of thing. Hopefully, knock on wood. So this levy is actually offset by our OMPF funding that Julia mentioned earlier, and it was about $1.8 million in 2022. So you can see a large chunk of our net levy goes towards operations and protective services. So that's transportation, parks, cemeteries, fire and emergency services, and transit. Okay, so I just wanted to point out a few key budget terms. So the first one here, the change year over year of the operating levy is the operating levy increase. Pretty self-explanatory. The next one is the capital levy increase, and that's the change between the capital levy from last year to this year. The total levy increase is the two of those combined. So you take the total budget and compare it to the total budget last year, and the difference is the total levy increase. Next slide. Okay, so a few more of them. And this, you'll see some of these tables in our annual budget book that we provide. So that top number there is the change between the Huntsville tax rate. So that's the Huntsville tax rate increase that we saw in 2022. And that bottom one is the total tax rate increase. So that takes into account not just the Huntsville taxes, but also the District of Muskoka and the education piece as well.
Can I say something? I think this is really important to note because quite often when we say our increase is a 2.14, that it's assumed that that's going to be the total increase on the bill, which isn't necessarily the case because we do have to factor in the education and the district portion as well.
Okay, so now we have to do we have the report? Can you just give us 1 minute, please, while we figure out a technical? Okay.
You two. We just had an idea. Lunch is sitting there, and we wondered if we should take a break for 15 minutes to go grab lunch, and then we can bring it back. That's okay with everybody? And then, because it's sitting there probably getting cold, and I think everybody needs a little bit of something as we, nothing. It's a riveting presentation, you two, and I apologize we don't have the videos. Sorry. You're doing a great job. So I think 15 while we go get food, and then we bring it back to the table. Okay? Ian? Perfect, we have the high five. All right, welcome back, everybody, whoever is watching. And before we move to the next part, I had a earth-shattering question of Riva, and that was with respect, if we went back to that chart that talks about what goes into the municipal budgeting, there's reference to implementing the strategic plan goals. And one of the things I just wanted Riva to update us on is often when the draft budget is presented and they take in all of the things, economic trends, and it's like the puzzle we had, right? That once it's around the table, there's always the, oh, this doesn't include council initiatives. And so it's often, for some of us, that appears to be a bit of a letdown, because then you think, oh, the project that I've been thinking we should be dealing with, it looks like it's an add-on, and in fairness to everybody involved, you then have to factor that in, and then, of course, that adjusts the numbers upwards. So it always appears that the council stuff is sort of after the fact. So Riva will tell us why it's not exactly like that. But I also think what really it emphasizes the importance of the strategic plan and ensuring that we've really identified what's important to us as much as we can in the strategic plan. But I'm sure Riva can respond in a much more fulsome way.
Absolutely. So I think there are a couple things that goes into what's a council initiative versus base level budget and that kind of thing. So essentially, things like the strategic plan, there are certain plans and studies throughout the year that have been adopted or approved by council as guiding documents. So those guiding documents might contain projects that are not necessarily already approved, right? So the council approved projects that we know about before the budget process will get put into the budget. Those projects that have not been approved specifically to move forward may not be in that draft budget. If at that point council would like to add those projects or specifically approve those projects, then those go in as council initiatives for that specific budget and would increase the net levy. Does that answer your question?
That does for me. Yes, Julia.
Just to add to that too, like when you look at something like the waterfront strategy that was
Right.
put forward,
Right.
that's a very large project with a lot of dollars that will need to be attached to that. So
Right.
hopefully when we look at that, we'll have a plan for when we phase those expenses in. So it's just because the plan's been put forward, we also need a plan in place to what money
Implement.
needs to be spent and then what years we're putting it into the budget.
Right, perfect. That's great. Thank you. Anyone? Yes, CAO Corey.
Thank you, Worship. So just to add to that, and you'll be hearing us chat about business plans, and they are extremely important to support the strategic plan, because it's one thing to have a vision, but in order to get where you need to go, you need a plan. So the strategic plan, as I noted during orientation, and I will be back to speak to you about that next month, is the direction you want to go, but unless we know when you want it phased in and how it's going to be funded, it will never come to reality. So I can't stress again how important it is that council supports the implementation of business plans with the strategic plan.
Thank you for that, and thank you all for humoring me on that one. Any other questions around that? I don't think so. Over to you. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Can we share the screen? Okay, so I know this is a little bit tricky to see, so if anybody wants the specific report in print, it is actually Appendix A to the Q3 report that we'll see later on. I just wanted to bring this up as an example of sort of the types of reports that you'll see throughout the budget and the forecasting processes. So this is, our budget software is called FMW. And this is FMW Report Viewer. So essentially, we provide reports that will be in the staff reports and that kind of thing. And this is the snapshot in time. So you can actually drill down in these reports. It's not just like a PDF, it's an interactive sort of report. So you can see departments, divisions, specific line items. You can see descriptions that staff have put in specifically supporting that line item. So there are a few things in here that I wanted to show. So you can actually collapse and expand the whole thing. So if we just want to see high level, okay, and we'll look at this, the actual numbers we'll look at later through our Q3 forecast. But we can see here, okay, we've got a forecasted surplus of about 175,000 organizationally at Q3, right? I can expand just the operating fund, and the capital fund is separate. I can expand, say I wanted to look at revenue. I can expand, and here's all of our revenue accounts listed in here. I wanted to use, our recreation team does a really good job of breaking out their registration fees. Let's look at youth programs. So these are all of their programs that they offer and the budget dollars associated with each of those programs. And you can see this is all detail that the staff have put in to FMW to explain this is why we're budgeting this money. So, you know, over the last few years, we've really had a push on providing as detailed descriptions as we possibly can to make it easier for you when you're reviewing the budgets and reviewing those line items, that you know exactly what we're budgeting for, right? That we're leaving very little up to guesswork, right? So I'm just going to scroll up, and then I can double click and it collapses that whole line. There's also, you know, all of our functional categories. So this is something that I alluded to earlier when I spoke about the financial information return. So we need to split out when we do our annual reporting. We need to split out things like salaries, wages, and benefits from materials and supplies, from contracted services, rents, and financial expenses. So those are our types of expenses. And then within here, so say rents and financials, we've got leases, merchant fees, bank charges, and this is for the entire organization. We can also see whichever department we want to see, right? So I'm going to pick on the CAO for now because she's right near the top. So this is the office of the CAO, and all of the detailed information specifically for that department's budget. And again, you can specifically go in here and see, oh, there's the CAO cell phone that we budgeted for. It's just the top of the list. And so you can expand and collapse every line in every department. So, you know, there's, let's go down to financial services. So financial services includes a whole bunch of different kind of sub-departments. We've got the town hall customer service. We've got actual financial services. We've got insurance and property taxes. So this financial services, this is a summary screen of the division. And then we can drill down and say, okay, I just want to see, let's just look at customer service for the Civic Center. This is the specific detailed items that we're budgeting for that specific area. So again, I'm not going to go through the numbers with any of these. We'll go through that when we go through the budget and later on when we go through the Q3 forecast. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and you can't hurt it. So whenever we send around the FMW reports, there is instructions in the presentation that were provided. There are detailed instructions on how to open it, how to save it, how to collapse and expand, and all of that stuff. So I really just wanted to show high level, this is what it looks like. And, you know, there's a ton of information in here. And I think that was, yeah.
Just to add to that too, this program's run, when we send out an email with the file, on the email it will have an EXE file, and that's the report viewer. So if you click on that and download that software, it will download it to your computer. But if you guys need any help with that, just make sure you let us know.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Clark?
Thanks, Mayor Alcock. Will council have access to that FMW software program at any time? Like if we wanted to look at it anytime we wanted, we have access to review that on our own?
So in our budget and financial controls policy, we have certain times that we do send out the financial information. We do the Q2 and we do the Q3, and then we do a final. And then we also, at budget time, will send out budget files. So what you'll have access to, it's a reader version of it, but it's to a point in time. So at any given time, you can't log into our budget software, accounting software, and see where the balances are. Yeah. So it won't always be live, almost live information, yeah. I was just going to add, we have a lot of different software components that come into our financial accounting software. So it's not just an easy click of a button. We actually have, I don't know how many different programs that feed into it that we have to reconcile, that kind of thing. So it does take a bit of time for us to get that, pull that information together.
Carry on. Yep.
And I actually, we can share? Yeah. So the other thing I just wanted to point out, so with respect to the way that municipal budgets work, and this is kind of all detailed in the video that we'll send out, but municipal finances are not like regular company financial statements or finances. So yes, we have revenues, yes, we have expenses, but municipal budgeting and municipal finances are done on a cash basis. So we budget for things like principal repayments on debt, right, as an expense in our budget. Regular company financial statements, that's not an expense, right? It's just you're paying out cash, but it's not an expense for them. So our budget is based on a cash basis. So we budget for things like if we're going to save money and put it into a reserve, we budget that as an expense. If money's coming out of a reserve, that's revenue in our budget. Our financial statements, and we will have a report coming forward when we present our audited financial statements and our year-end report, that explains the difference between how our financial statements are presented and how our budget is presented, because they're two entirely different forms of accounting. The budget is a cash basis, to make things simple, right? The budget is a cash basis per the Municipal Act, and our financial statements are an accrual basis. So when we know revenue's coming in and we just haven't collected it yet, we still record that revenue, and we also have a receivable in our assets. So I think that's something that's really important to note is you'll see things like principal repayments on debt. You'll see things like reserve transfers or reserve contributions included in our budget, and that's why. It's because it's on a cash basis. So if it's money going out, it's an expense. If it's money coming in, it's a revenue, essentially, for our budget purposes. Okay? Okay. Do you want to switch?
That's because they didn't put up the little slide that says questions.
It's
I got
kind of
very
mid
I'm very
municipal
confused.
budgeting.
I'm very confused now. Councillor Harmer.
Thank you, Worship, through you to Reba. So when we have outstanding taxes, have we still shown that as a revenue?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
It's a modified cash basis.
Yeah, it's a modified cash basis of accounting.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. Just to follow up on Councillor Armour's question, so for supplementary tax income that we haven't received, is that included in budget as income to come as well, or not?
You're on.
Yep, so we do budget for supplementary taxes, and we just do it based on prior years and what we think we're going to get when we talk to MPAC. I think you'll see this year we're actually lower than we have been in, lower than we expected. So yeah, that is part of the budget. But we would record whatever we received as actual income for that year.
Okay. So with our operating section of our budget, some of our revenue sources, and we do have quite a few revenue sources, so things like user fees, licenses, fines, permits, development and planning fees, like there's a whole slew of them. We get, penalties and interest charges, investment income, dividends from our Lakeland investment, grants, development charges, and property tax is a big one. So this is a kind of a snapshot of a whole bunch of the different types of revenue that we get. So this one is an example of one of the charts that's available on that FIR website that I mentioned earlier. This is a breakdown of user fees and service charges by function. So things like general government, protective services, recreation and cultural services, planning and development, that kind of thing. So this is broken down by function. So you can see with this one, a large chunk of our user fees come from recreation and culture services. So things like recreation programs. Okay, so this is another example of the expenditures. So again, another example of a graph that's available on the FIR website. So this is showing the total expenses of the organization. So you can see, a large chunk of the expenses are for transportation services, which really is not surprising. Okay, so wages and benefits are actually the largest component of the town's operating budget. So even a small increase would impact the net budget or tax rate. So we do have union and collective agreements established with annual increases for unionized employees. Non-unionized employees are covered in a policy for other staff and is based on CPI trim each year. So again, this is a breakdown of something on one of the graphs available on the FIR website using the 2021 info. Okay, so the capital budget really is about identifying capital needs and saving for future infrastructure. There are certain pieces of different types of revenue that can come in for the capital budget. Things like development charges for funding growth-related projects, capital grants, and external revenues, things like donations, for example, for large capital projects. We do need to look at forecasting reserve and reserve fund balances over a period of time. And that's something that you'll see when we bring forward the capital budget. We do bring forward a 5-year plan and a 5-year contribution estimate. So we look at, okay, what are our projects over the next 5 years? How much realistically do we need to save each year in order to be able to fund the future capital replacement? So a lot of that comes from our asset management plan. Staff do go through and revise all of our asset data every single year. We look at condition ratings and risk assessments for every asset. So there's a lot of information that goes into that capital budget. We also do need to look at our debt and see, okay, maybe there are some larger projects that, we may need to look at getting debt for those projects. But we do try and avoid those situations where we can, because it does, when you're looking at interest costs, it does end up costing more over the long term. And we do need to make sure that we're following not only our asset management plan, our master plans, our strategic plans, our development charge background study, and our budget and financial controls policy. So this is just a quick representation of our anticipated departmental contributions each year. So it kind of breaks it down by department. And you can see the largest chunk, that purple at the top, is transportation. And our roads infrastructure, our bridges, our storm sewer networks, all of that. That's a large, very large dollar value chunk of our assets that we have that we need to make sure we're saving for future replacements. And this is showing the transfers out of the reserves to fund those capital projects. So essentially, it's showing the spending over the period of time that we're anticipating. So there are kind of two pieces to the capital budget. And again, I'll go into detail when I bring forward the 2023 capital budget. But there are two pieces to it. There's the contributions, which is saving for future replacements. And then there's the actual projects, so the spending. So the spending are funded through the reserves, through grants that we get, through development charges, that kind of thing. So those, yes, we need to look at them combined, but they are also two very separate pieces, right? How much are we taxing each year for that capital, and how much are we going to spend in that year for capital? Okay? Yeah.
Just along that lines too, I just think it's really important just to show how it impacts the levy, because we took on this approach several years ago where we put the money into reserves and just we're slowly increasing it rather than budgeting for big projects and then not budgeting for big projects. So we weren't budgeting like this. You didn't see the sharp increases every year. We were budgeting this way so that we were having a nice slow incline.
Okay, and this is just sort of a representation of our ending capital replacement balances. So you can see here that there is a bit of a dip happening because of some large capital projects that we know may need to be done in the next 5-year period. But we will look at a strategy for that. And again, we'll bring that forward with our 2023 capital budget presentation. Okay, so timelines. So in early January 2023, now having done this training, we are going to bring forward the capital budget. And it's a nice piece of the budget to get your feet wet. It's a little bit easier to understand. And so we will bring that forward in early January of 2023, and we will kind of go through every single project and why it's necessary, and discuss the plan for contributions over the next few years. Then later on, the next step is to bring the operating and the consolidated budget. So the operating being specifically the operational piece of the budget, and consolidated includes the capital as well. So you'll see it kind of all big picture together. Then in February, we're going to have a budget meeting for discussion. So we can absolutely respond to any questions you have or changes that need to be made at that point. And we're hoping end of February, kind of beginning of March, that we will bring forward the budget for approval. So we are very optimistic that we'll bring forward a good budget for you guys to review, and we're very much looking forward to a great discussion this year, and absolutely welcome any questions that you guys have. We fully understand this is the first time that a lot of you will be seeing a municipal budget, so absolutely we're here to answer any questions that you guys have.
Oops. Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. So we all know that we're going to need a new municipal garage. So has that been started yet, or has there been reserves start? I noticed on the pretty big peak there, the transportation services for 20, has that already been started for that specific, anything for that yet, or is it? Because I know there was a report brought in from an engineer last summer or whatever.
I'm not sure that was actually in our budget, was it? I don't think we.
The funding question. We don't have a specific reserve set aside for that building, for the replacement of it or rebuilding it.
Yeah.
So we haven't, that's one building that we have not been setting money aside for. So that is why you'll see that big deficit in there. That's one of the items.
That's what I was just wondering if that was
That might be.
one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons, and one of the other big reasons is the Centennial Pool when it needs to be
Yeah.
redone.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Right. Yes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. In regard to any investments that we have, and you mentioned Lakeland, we have investments with Lakeland. we obviously get dividends back from some of these investments, and even with the joint investments that we do with Bracebridge with the other municipalities. Does that get rolled back into the lump sum, or do we use those dividends in other reason or any other way?
So there's a number of ways that the investment income and the dividends are treated. So specifically with the Lakeland dividends, we get just over $400,000 a year in dividends. So in the 22 budget, we budgeted to put just over $200,000 into our working funds reserve, and that's something that we've done for years. And so 2022, we actually reduced that contribution to reserves by $100,000. So it was normally $324,000 we put into working funds, and we did reduce that by $100,000 in the 22, and it was to be a one-time only reduction. So in the 23 budget, we are anticipating that's going to be $324,000 to go back into reserves. So we keep $100,000 in to offset the levy. So that's the dividends. Then the investment income that we earn, so specifically for the Forbes Hill investment income, that gets put into the Forbes Hill reserve. Then there's the development charge investment income that gets put back into those obligatory reserves because we're required to put that investment income back into those reserve funds. And then there's there's capital. So part of what's invested through the Prudent Investor One Investment Board are capital reserves. So, a lot of the money that we saved that are in our capital reserves are in those investments rather than in our general bank account. So we do put anything specifically related to our capital reserves go back into those capital reserves. So they are going towards building those capital funds. Anything else is kind of just left in operating to help offset the levy. So there's a lot of moving pieces.
Which is an excellent backdrop for our future discussion around local share. Just saying. I think. Any other questions?
Can I just add one more thing on that one?
Councillor Morrison.
Oh,
We're out of tune, we don't even have the questions slide in front of us. We're all just forget the questions. It is Marty's, sorry.
A quick comment and then a question. I'm thoroughly impressed with what you guys are doing. It sounds that I wouldn't be able to rhyme off numbers like you guys are. You know your stuff. It seems to me that our finances are in pretty decent order as a corporation, and I think that speaks to your skill and your staff skills. So very good to see that, and we're looking forward to working with you, Corey and I. Question on, just because it's fresh in my mind, and Mayor Alcock and I have had chats about this stuff, the grants. Right now, I met Lauren during our speed dating round, and she's amazing. She seems to be a department of one. Getting the impression you guys are also involved heavily in writing grants, and you also have a lot on your plate. Is there enough grant money out there, knowing that we have big capital expenditures coming, that we should increase the staff levels around grant writing? In your opinion, of course.
I don't think I'll comment on increasing the staff levels, but I would say that a lot of the capital grants, we do have a consultant that we have used in the past for that, and we have been successful in writing those grants. So for those big grants, then definitely. For the smaller grants, there's a lot of work that gets involved in those smaller grants. So if we are going to entertain a lot more of those, there would be a lot more staff resources that would be required.
There we go. Yeah, that's an interesting dialogue. Just a quick comment. You guys have on your dates, January 12th, review of capital budget. And I'm told that actually that's January 11th. Is that right?
Whatever day is on the agenda or on the website is the right day. Okay. We'll correct on this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, back to you.
I think that's everything.
Is that it?
That's everything.
Whoa. Thank you. Questions. If I had scrolled a little bit more.
You have the rest of the agenda now,
Thank
though.
you. Questions. Thank you both. That was really, that was wonderful. So, but I now, all right, I've got Brandon's. Okay, so we are moving right along. And Mr. Hall has been waiting patiently for quite some time. It's your turn. So we are moving to 7.2, report number OPS 2020-240, Lions Lookout Park Electrical Power Supply.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, 10 seconds here. So what I have is a report under GC 11722. Staff were directed to report back about running electrical and heating up to Lions Lookout Park, as well as the little building that's located up there. Dove into it. We retained Dawson's to kind of make some more sense about the
Brandon,
request.
I'm sorry, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. We do things differently at council than planning. I'm supposed to read the motion before you're supposed to speak. haven't been
I said
doing
10
that.
seconds.
I know, sorry, sorry. Okay, everybody, apologies. I have a motion moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that staff be directed to defer the installation of electricity and heating to Lions Lookout Park and building to allow time for the following. 1, to develop concepts and options for future year-round use of the Lions Lookout Park that align with current council-approved strategies and master plan reference documents. And 2, to work with community groups, the public, including holding public consultations and interested user groups in developing the concepts and options for the future use of Lions Lookout Park. And further that, staff report back to committee with the consultation plan in March 2023. And further that, staff report back to committee with Lions Lookout Park year-round use concepts in October 2023 for council to consider. Back to you.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, just to reiterate, council did direct staff to look at running electrical services and heating to Lions Lookout Park, as well as the building. We retained Dawson's Electric to kind of make some sense of that request and how it can be done. So in your report, we did provide 3 Class C level estimates to get the electricity to the park itself. They range from $50,000 to $300,000. And reached out to another contractor to determine some type of heating solution for the internal building. And you'll see in the heating estimate, it talks about a bit of lights and stuff like that too. So the building's not equipped for electricity or for lights as well as heat. So that's why it's included in that estimate. So the building itself does need a bit of work inside. It's currently being used as storage. So staff got together and we feel that the best option is to look at an overall concept plan before we actually run services to there. The last thing you want to do is run a 200 amp service and then realize a year from now we want to do something bigger and the electricity can't support it. So again, same kind of practice that we've done with Kent Park, Rivermill Park. Staff would like to do some public consultation as well as feedback with the user groups as well and come back with some concepts of what future use for that park can be. And we'll come back with some timelines of when that's going to happen and how, and then hopefully can move forward with achieving your requests. So until then, we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Brandon. Yes, Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Alcock. Yeah, no, I would prefer this. I mean, I know at one point, I think the chamber was talking about possibly doing an installation of light to tie into Eclipse or whatever up there. So needing the infrastructure to be able to do something like that, like they've done the canopy at Kent Park. I would want to make sure that we have the stuff in place to be able to do that. So I assume that's what you're looking to do, correct, Brandon?
Yeah, through your worship, I apologize. One of the important factors in this report is we have consulted with the chamber. They are in full support of postponing the installation of electrical and heating until we can come up with an overall concept. But they will be one that we sit down with for sure.
Excellent. That's good. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. Thanks, Brandon, for your report. Agree with you wholeheartedly that we need to engage everyone and figure out what the game plan is. I think maybe depending on that input, we should consider backup power up there as well. So food for thought.
Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Mayor Alcoy. Is there, I know there's water up there, is there sewer up there too?
Through your worship, so right now, there's a temporary water service that's quite shallow, so it's running 24/7 during the winter months. Is it sized enough to have bathrooms? No, it's not. So water and sewer would either need to be run through the end of De Novo on Forbes Hill Drive, or it would need to come through the back of the Summit Center. So that's another exercise that we're hoping to undertake as far as the overall conceptual plan of things, that if, washrooms are something that council wants, then
Well,
we're
I
gonna
think
have to run it
that's
there.
something that we should look at while if we end up doing the hydro, is the other services up there, because it is a place for good future development of certain facilities, and then we're not running into the same scenario that we ran in downtown with washrooms and stuff like that, so.
Understood, yeah. Through your worship, it is our intent to come back with full conceptual plans on how they can be serviced.
So Brandon, this motion accommodates those comments? Okay, excellent. Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Worship, through you. Thanks, Brandon. How does this incorporate with the waterfront strategy? Is it all part of that same picture, the Lions Lookout?
Through your worship, I'd have to check back with that. I know there is parts of your strategic direction as far as the Lions Lookout Park, so.
Excellent. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I will call the question. All those in favor? See, I'd already signed it because I predicted that was going to be the case. Thanks, Brandon, and for your patience for waiting so long. There we go. Moving right along back to you, Reba. And before you start, I have to read a motion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that Council approve the 2022 Q3 budget deviations as outlined in Appendix B of Report Corp -2022-90.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. There we go. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to note a couple of things with respect to the forecast. So the 2022 year-to-date actuals column in Appendix A of the report only represent the actuals to the end of September, or the end of Q3 2022. The forecast was prepared by staff in early November, so it does only reflect information known at that point in time. So as we tried to illustrate during our speed dating orientation session, information is changing constantly. So this really is a snapshot at that point in time that we did the forecast. The forecast, which is included in Appendix A of the report, shows an estimated operating surplus of about $175,000. Okay, so I did want to go through the appendices in a little bit more detail and explain how to read them. So a summary of the budget deviations included in the Q3 forecast have been provided in Appendix B. So these show the forecasted deviations from the originally approved 2022 budget. So I just want to walk through and explain how to read this. So the first page of Appendix B shows a breakdown of the forecasted surplus by division and by department. So these groupings do coincide with Appendix A and how that's broken down, and are consistent with how the budget will be presented. So on this first page, this final budget column is fairly self-explanatory. It's the 2022 final budget. The September 30th actuals column, again, fairly self-explanatory. It's the actual transactions that have occurred up to the end of September of 2022. This budget remaining column is showing the difference between the budget and the actuals to date. Okay, the next column is the Q3 forecast. So that shows the forecast for 2022. So it includes not only what's already happened in 2022, but what staff are expecting to happen by the end of 2022. So it's a full year forecast of where do we think we'll end up The Q3 forecasted net levy decrease or increase column is showing the difference between the budget and the Q3 forecast. So I wanted to point out a few things with this column. So in this column, all of the amounts that are shown in black mean that the overall net levy of that department or division has been reduced. So either that means that there's less overall spending, essentially. If the amount is shown in red, it means that there's more overall spending in that area. So for example, I'm going to pick on the CAO again. The Office of the CAO shows that there will be approximately $5,300 less spending than was originally budgeted. So way to go, CAO. The HR department shows that we're expecting approximately $4,800 more spending than was originally budgeted. And I hate to pick on you, Lisa, sorry. So these differences can all be identified in Appendix A, where each of the revenues and expenses are shown separately for each department. And I am just going to toggle back to Appendix A, and I'm going to show you in the Office of the CAO, each line item, you can see the forecasted budget difference for each specific line item. So in memberships, there's $168 that we're expecting to spend over budget, right? Although in professional development, we're expecting to see $1,000 less spending. So all of the detailed information, and we can see at the bottom of this report, there's that $5,300 there. Okay, so all of this information between all of the appendices tie. Okay. So on the next few pages of this appendix, I just want to go through each column again so you know what you're looking at. And I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'll just scroll. So this leftmost column, the date of reporting, shows the date the deviation was either previously approved or it's going to show today's date. So these are the ones that are recommended for approval today. The next few columns, again, are fairly self-explanatory, including who approved it, so whether it was General Committee or Council, the department, and the division. Okay? I did want to note that several of the deviations have already been approved through specific reports to Council throughout 2022. So further on down in this appendix, as an example, there are 3 deviations, related to the grant, costs, and the reserve funding for the Electronic Records Management Modernization Project. So this was brought forward to Council in a report in February and approved at that point. So you'll see further on in the list that the date of approval was actually a date in February. Okay? So this next column here shows a thumbs up or thumbs down. Right? So this is a very clear, and it's a little hard to see on the screen in here. So it's a very clear picture of, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Right? Did it positively impact the net levy? So either an increase in revenues or a decrease in costs, or did it negatively impact the net levy? Right? So a decrease in revenue or an increase in costs, right? So you can see very quickly, is it a good thing or a bad thing? You'll also notice that not every deviation has a net levy effect. So this is usually because that specific item might be transferred into a reserve. So I'm going to go back to this very top item in the list here. Okay, so we can see there's no net levy increase or decrease. This was a WSIB surplus rebate that we received in 2022. The rebate was entirely transferred into our human capital reserve that can be used in the future. So because we received the money and then it was transferred into a reserve, there's no net levy impact. So it's not impacting this year's net levy. I think it is important to note, though, that we do want to identify this, even though that there's no net levy impact, because it shows Council that we did receive the money and we're accounting for it in accordance with our financial reserve policy. Okay, so the next 2 columns, so these 2 columns back here, they show that if there's a difference in the deviation from what was presented previously, and it provides an explanation for the change. So I want to go over this second item here. This is the sale of shore and road allowances. So we don't actually budget for this revenue because we don't know how many of these are going to sell or what they're going to sell for in the year. It's very difficult to predict that. So with this revenue, it gets entirely transferred. As we earn it, it gets transferred into the town capital replacement reserve. Okay? So in the Q2 forecast, we actually presented a deviation of about $47,500. So at that point in time, we had already earned $47,563. Okay? In Q3, we've had sales since then. So we've had an additional $7,069 since we reported the Q2 deviation. That's why there's a change, because we earn more revenue. Okay? So there are a few high-level items that I wanted to point out with respect to the forecast. So staff vacancies throughout the year. So this was including, not being able to fill part-time positions as well as actual vacancies in full-time positions. There's savings of approximately $420,000, specifically related to salaries, wages, and benefits. So these SWB, so salaries, wages, and benefits, reductions meant that staff resources have not been available in a lot of areas to tackle operational projects or tasks. So that work will likely need to be carried forward to future years. It's just things didn't get done because we didn't have the people in the positions to do them. So as reported early in the year, fuel costs have also increased in the forecast by roughly $100,000 organizationally, and that was brought forward to council separately in a deviation report. And that was really the result of increased fuel prices through a substantial portion of 2022. Another notable revenue reduction is tax penalty revenue of about $162,000. And we did report this deviation in the Q2 forecast, but I really wanted to reiterate with this new council. So it is a reduction in revenue, but it's actually a good news story. So the reduction in penalty revenue means that the balance of unpaid taxes has reduced significantly. So basically, taxpayers are paying off their tax balances more quickly or frequently. So property tax staff have actively been working with taxpayers to reduce that outstanding balance of taxes receivable with regular payment plans and that kind of stuff. So ultimately, we're saving our taxpayers interest and penalty going forward. So yes, it's reduced the revenues that we're going to earn, but it's a really great thing for our community to not be charging that revenue to our taxpayers, right? The one last significant increase in income is with respect to our interest income. So we are expecting this to increase from the original budget by about $180,000. And that's really just based on interest that we've earned to date and the higher interest rates that we're seeing. So moving on to capital, and I am just going to bring up so Appendix C shows all of the different capital projects throughout the year. So it does indicate, and just this bottom number here does indicate that we're expecting about $157,000 less spending than what we originally budgeted. So there is no net levy impact because all of these projects are funded through our reserves, our capital reserves, right? So if we spend less, it just means that money stays in our reserves, okay? So there are, the reduction of the spending is largely a result of a number of few projects that are detailed in the staff report. So one of them that actually increased the spending was the Municipal Modernization Program accounting project. So this was one that we got a large grant to look at upgrades to our accounting software. So this project was previously approved by council and just was not included in the budget. So the overall spending for this project is about $108,000. But it is, again, fully funded through a grant and a reserve transfer through our corporate software reserve. There's also a Parks and Trails inventory project that's included in Appendix C with costs of about $25,000 in 2022. So again, this project was previously approved back in May of 2022 to a maximum spend of $50,000, and it is covered by a grant. The next and really the largest reason why our spending is so significantly lower this year is the Civic Center front steps brickwork project. So there was some minor work and some consulting in 2022, but because of largely timing and availability of contractors, the project is forecasted to be deferred to 2023. So you will see this when we bring forward the 2023 capital budget. So those deferred costs will be the unused portion of the project costs from 2022. And again, the project's fully funded through our facilities capital reserve, so there's no net levy impact. The Macaulay Robertson Pickleball Court project did require more aggregates than was originally anticipated, and we did incur some additional fencing costs that were required. So these amounts resulted in a deviation of approximately $45,000, which was approved in the Q2 forecast. And the Port Sydney Multi-Use Courts project incurred deviations of approximately $50,000, and again, all of those deviations were previously approved. And really related to an anticipated, or higher than anticipated RFP costing, which was approved back in March of 2022, along with the non-refundable part of the HST, which was about $9,900. And again, that was reported in the Q2 forecast. So I think that's everything I wanted to specifically go through. I am available for questions.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. I noticed last week when we met, we were down to have an overhaul of the district budget system too. They talked about SWBs and at the end of the year, what they use that money for. So if we've got $400,000 at the end of the year, does that go back into operating, or where does it go to reserves, or is it just assumed into the, where's that money go?
Yeah, it's there's kind of a couple pieces of the savings in 2022. So in the 2022 budget, we did forecast for a few overlap of positions of some retirements and people leaving that didn't happen. And those were supposed to be funded through reserves. So what happens with those is, we have savings in the SWB line, but we also have that, we take out that reserve contribution to cover that initial cost that was budgeted. So those kind of even out. With the other savings, essentially it's used to offset any increases and throughout the operations. Essentially, it stays in the operating budget. It doesn't go into a specific reserve or anything like that.
Right, like a working.
Is that?
Okay. Thank you, Reba. I think that's it. I think that's it for you today. I think. Thank you. I think. Nice. That's most excellent. All right, I did read the motion. We do have a motion. You don't need me to read it again. I'm not going to. But I am going to call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you for all of that. And now we are switching it up, and we're moving over to planning and development. And we're being joined by Kirsten. All right, it said Kelsey on here. Welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Before you start, I'm going to, did I sign? I think I signed it. I did. Okay, excellent. I'm going to read the motion. I know. I have a motion moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Stone. Be it resolved that Council approve the bylaw for part lot control as it pertains to blocks 30, 31, and 32, Plan 35M. -760, Geographic Township of Chaffey, and further that the final bylaw be forwarded to the next council meeting for final approval. Over to you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kelsey, I'm doing the report for Kelsey, just so you guys all know. This application, part lot control, is a different sort of a lot creation application. It's very technical, and we do maybe one application a year of this nature. So once, basically, the bylaw that council will pass will create the lots once they're registered. The bylaw has to go to the district and they final approve it, and then the bylaw gets registered and the lots get created. And it's usually only used for things, lots that are being accessed off a condominium, common element condominium road, or in this instance, it's the subdivision up off Wood Stream. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
I'm not seeing any, but I'm going to ask just because I did earlier, and it's probably obvious to everybody. But in this motion, we say, and the final bylaw be forwarded to the next council meeting for final approval. And given we have council here today, the rationale for this is public notice?
No, actually, it's the bylaw that council passes has to have all of the parts on the plan listed so that we can, the land registry office can identify what the land is that it pertains to. And at the time the agenda was being posted, and I haven't still heard today, the plan hadn't been deposited, so we didn't have a number that we could have in a bylaw, so.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. All right, any other questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Mr. Kidd will be very happy. Okay. All right. So on this one, I'm just going to read the original and then the amendment? Okay. Oh, okay. Before we turn it over to you, Lisa, hold on. So I do have a motion, we are now at 7.5, and this is with respect to report number Corp 2022-91, 2022 to 2026 council and committee structure support. So I do have the original motion, which I am going to read, moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Clark, whereas the proposed 2022 to 2026 council and committee structure outlines 3 new committees requiring extensive support in order to ensure their success. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the 2 new contract positions as outlined in report Corp-2022-91 and any related costs to be funded through the Human Capital Reserve, and further that staff report back with lay member composition and terms of reference for the 3 new committees at the January 2023 council committee. And my apologies, I do have an amendment, but perhaps I should ask if there are any questions or comments with respect to this original motion, at which point I might be asking Councillor Stone.
Do you want me to suggest an amendment now?
I
Or
would
do we
like,
wanna-
if you would like to comment on this particular original motion and why you might have proposed an amendment.
All right, well, thank you for the floor. So let me start with the fact that we've all just come off the campaign trail, and I'm sure all of us heard many of the desires to implement some of the things that are outlined in these 3 committees. I think we're all very passionate about some of these things that we want to have done. I've also been around long enough to know that committees sometimes have great ideas and lots of talking and nothing ever gets done. That's some of these committees. So I feel it's very important that we set these committees up for success by a staff members. But I was quite concerned with the $197,000 that was outlined to pay for these staff members. And I did question the need for 2 particular staff members. So my amendment speaks to both of those things, and so I'm going to suggest that we reduce it to 1 coordinator, manager, to run with these 3 committees, because we absolutely have to have somebody that's going to take our ideas and get more information, coordinate all the different pieces, study the plans that we want, that each of these committees want. So with that, I do have the amendment in front of you, is seconded by Councillor Armour. I would also like to know how much we're actually planning on spending for this. If we had only 1, how much might that be?
think I have approval to read the proposed amendment, and then you can respond, Lisa, to the question, and then we might entertain a few more questions. All right? So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that paragraph 2 be struck out and replaced with the following paragraph. Now therefore, be it resolved that council approve the one new contract position and any related costs to be funded through the Human Capital Reserve. So, now you can respond.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Alcock, to Councillor Stone. So if we were looking for a coordinator position, I have a little bit of a range because this is a new position for us, so we would have it evaluated through our firm that does our evaluations. And looking at our current bands, and referring to our treasurer as well, the range would be, and this would include all of our payroll costs as well, so this is your all-in cost. So 77,000 to 90,000, that would be the range. And then you would obviously have a reduction as well from the current report on your IT costs. So we had, I think there was $4,000 in there. So that was for 2 people, obviously, and then a reduction of your professional development. So any kind of training that will need to be required for this position, that's been reduced as well. So in total, you know, even at the highest point, you'd be looking at 93,500.
Thank you very much.
Okay, appreciate all of those comments. Thank you. Councillor Cluche.
Thank you, Mayor. Should we not be putting a timeline, like a term, whether it be a 1-year term, 2-year term, or whatever? Because, I mean, somebody's going to take a job get in there, and then they're gone in a year. I think it's more attractive to get a better person if the term of the hiring has a length attached to it.
I think that's a great suggestion, and in fact, I don't think that was in our original motion. The intent was always to attach it to the project, and the committees would be struck for a 1-year mandate, always with the potential of, you know, one might be lagging behind or whatever. But the intent would be that position would be attached to the lifetime of the committees. So I don't know if we need to include that. I'm looking around at those who might know. Lisa would know, yes.
Through you,
that
Mayor
would-
Alcock. So just within the report, we did have a term of 12 months. But certainly, you know, if it's required beyond that, we would come back to council for those funds to be spent, right, for the person. As you said, with respect to a 12-month contract, how attractive would that be for anybody applying for the job? We have had individuals apply for those types of jobs, so they are applying. As to those with the exact skill sets that we would require for this job, that would be, we'd have to see, right? So, does that kind of answer?
Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Mayor Alcock, and I enjoy the conversation we're having around this. I guess I feel sometimes we let the monetary thing decide the quality of employee or subcontract employee we want to attract to this job. 3 different positions which require totally different skill sets. So how do we find now from 2 people down to 1 person who meets all the skill sets required to perform these duties? So I think sometimes we have to look at the bigger picture and say, what do we want to accomplish here? And I think what we want to accomplish is great. I think it's a big deal. Do we worry about attracting the best person to do that in each of those categories? I think we do, because we're setting a goal for ourselves, and it's not to save money on someone to come and work for us and do half the job we want them to do. So I think that they're very specific, and when we look at the impact on SWB and the impact of what can be accomplished if we do this properly, it's null and void. So I want everyone to think carefully about the financial impact versus a long-term goal.
I think those are great comments, and Councillor Armour would like to follow up or offer
Thank you, Your Worship.
something.
Through you. No, I hear what Councillor Fitzgerald's saying, but I think what we need on this is a term of reference or a job description, so with true measurables. So by hiring one person this time and finding out what the terms of reference are, the measurables, the job description is, maybe that person could come back in 6 months saying that I need someone else to come with me. But I don't think jumping out of the gate right away with 2 people, because we don't even know what we're going, we don't even have a term of reference yet. We don't know what the committees are going to bring forward. And we all know that, active transportation, et cetera, will have a price tag attached to it also, right? So I think we need to get those all in place first and then dive into it further when we know exactly what we're going for. Thanks.
If I may follow up, thank you for that, on your comments, Councillor Fitzgerald, I hear what you're saying. It seems to me the kind of person where we're looking at the very base level is someone who is able to do policy analysis, policy research, is a coordinator, and is an organizer. And does that person exist? Well, if you look down at the district, members of the community improvement unit, that's exactly what they do. If I can be really personal and go right to someone like Tina Kilborn, who is the staff member responsible for all of the work of the Ideas Committee, the MALT Committee, and I know there are many other staff members who contribute, as well as councillors and all of that stuff. But there really is one person that does that whole ball of wax. And if we can get that person for our one-year contract, I think it does behoove us to pay that person well if we get the right person. And I think that is doable. That's my thought. And a little bit to Councillor Armour's comment, if that person 3 months down the road identifies other activities that are not being covered off, then we can revisit it at that time. Yes.
And I couldn't agree with comments more of Councillor Armour and you, Your Worship. I think to accomplish the goal, if we think we can do that, and maybe more information is required on the actual job description and what is involved, and is it 3 months or is it 6 months where this comes under review? So I like that. Proceed with caution by all stretches. Just make sure we get the right person in there.
Couldn't agree with you more, and I see our HR director is chomping at the bit.
Through you, Mayor Alcock. Just to note, we do have some benchmarks in Muskoka with respect to this kind of position. So we are reaching out to garner more information, and we're doing our research at our end to put together some things. So we do have job descriptions already drafted with the existing report that we provided. So we do have something established, but certainly we do have other areas that we can pull from to do that research and what skills and qualifications they may have.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, CAO Corey. I think I've been ignoring her. I didn't
Thank
mean
you, Your
to.
Worship. No, that's okay. I'm just sitting here. So it is to Councillor Fitzgerald's point. It always is a challenge when you do merge job profiles and responsibilities. So the reason that it was proposed that we do 2 separate is because there are 2 components of the position that are very different. We have right from policy development, review of existing plans, very high level thinking. And then we have a lot of administrative stuff that's required as well. So trying to balance out, if you put the job profiles through for evaluation and you have them separated out, then the wages will accommodate what the responsibilities are. But it definitely can be merged. It is a trial position. It's new. So we just go in with all of those responsibilities merged into one profile, knowing that we're paying a certain fee for all of those responsibilities, even though they might not fall in the same wage range if you broke them out. But certainly to try it on a short-term basis, and to the mayor's point, if we find that we get in there 6 months and we're struggling and can't get it done, we will be back before you to say we need some more resources to do it. But I think it's a good start to see where we need to go.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else who would, yes, Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would support the amendment that Councillor Stone has put forward, and with what other councillors have said, that we take our time after 6 months, or say 3 months, and review the position. So basically what was said.
Great. Yes, Councillor Harmer.
Thank you very much. I just want to make sure we realize is that we haven't gone through budget yet on this, so this is coming out of the human resources.
It is.
fund, so it's not affecting anything. So we all know we can give this a good go, and I think everybody realizes we currently don't have the staff for the town to be able to do these committees, so this is why we're doing this.
Thank you for that. There's absolutely no doubt that this is a critical element of the 3 committees and all of these issues going forward. So it's really important. I don't see any other comments, so I am going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Well, I don't know what that was. All those opposed? All those opposed, Councillor? No? Okay. I think that was unanimous, I think. So I am going to read the original as amended. I don't have to read it now. Oh, man. I could, I have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. It's really easy. I'm going to read it. Whereas the proposed 2022-26 council and committee structure outlines 3 new committees requiring extensive support in order to ensure their success, now therefore be it resolved that council approve the 1 new contract position and any related costs to be funded through the Human Capital Reserve, and further that staff report back with lay member composition and terms of reference for the 3 new committees at the January 2023 council meeting. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everyone, for a really great discussion around that. Okay, moving right along, Kirsten is back, our Director of Development Services, to talk to us about this new legislation, More Homes Faster 2022. My voice goes down. All right, over to you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Your Worship. This act is just the most recent in a series of changes that the province has implemented extremely quickly in the last year and a half or so. So we've still been playing catch up from previous things that they've done, but this one, it passed November 28th, and the majority of the changes are all in effect as of that date. So I did list sort of high level, an overview of everything that the act was affecting. But ultimately, some of the changes that they're proposing are going to be extremely difficult. I know that a lot of the larger municipalities are going to be very challenged from a financial perspective with development charges and how they're going to be able to accommodate these changes. In Huntsville, we're lucky in some ways that we've been very progressive with a lot of the things that we're doing so that it won't affect us necessarily in the same way as the bigger centers. But I did go through sort of and give a high-level overview of the things that it's hard for us to quantify still as well, because not all the rules are in place. We don't know what the effect of everything would be. But for Parkland, for example, the biggest concern that I think we have is the fact that a developer can tell us what parkland that it is they want to give us. The land can be encumbered, so it can have easements on it. It could be have other utilities running through it, and it can be private parkland that the town would never own or manage that would count towards their contribution. So that's quite different for us. So it's going to take us a bit of organizing to figure out how that works with our park strategy and with our waterfront development strategy and community services master plan to see what that effect could be. There's also a requirement that 60% of our parkland reserves would need to be budgeted for annually, which is extremely high. We don't collect that much in parkland to begin with when we're getting cash in lieu instead of actual land. So to accumulate enough that we could use it for something substantial is, going to be extremely challenging. Development charges, the change with development charges, in some ways they won't affect us at all. In others, it's going to be pretty substantial. the amounts that have to be budgeted for annually, there's a 60% requirement for those two that it has to be allocated for priority services. So in our case, that would only be roads that would be affected. But we don't know yet exactly what all of those things will look like. Some of the other changes are things that we were already doing with exceptions to the development charges bylaw for affordable housing and allowing people to have a phased-in payment because we had deferrals for some rental housing. Inclusionary zoning, the province did not allow us to have that as a tool previously, as it was something that the minister had to prescribe. And we don't know if that's changed or not yet, or if that will still be the same moving forward. Built heritage. The built heritage, it's interesting, because I don't know that the province has demonstrated that there's a tie between built heritage and restrictions on development in association with heritage buildings and affordable housing. But we have a list of 200 properties, over 200 properties that are of interest that were, I think the list was done in the late 90s, early 2000s. And as of whenever the changes come into effect for the Heritage Act, that list will be null and void within 2 years. So we wouldn't be able to, the way it works is if someone wants to demolish a property that's on the list, they have to get council's permission before they do the demolition, because council could say, no, we want to designate that building and have it so that it's protected in some form or another. But as of 2 years from the date, the list will be null and void, and we'd have to wait 5 years to put one of those properties back on. Changes to the Ontario Land Tribunal will give them more ability to refuse appeals that they think are vexatious and frivolous. They do have some ability now, but they don't ever exercise it, from what I understand. And they also could award costs to people that are not in good faith going towards the tribunal. They do cost very rarely at this time. From an environmental perspective, there's changes to wetland evaluations, and I know there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not the province will allow development closer to wetlands in the Greenbelt. I think, I'm not sure, but I think that there might be some changes that they will bring forward because there's been quite a bit of public outcry about that. When we talk about planning approvals, from as of the 28th, anything that's an urban residential lot, so it's serviced by municipal water and sewer, can now have 3 units as of right, as of the 28th of November. So we were moving towards 2 units as of right on a property, which is part of our community planning permit bylaw that hopefully will be in effect in January, but now they're permitting 3. The only limitations we have are ensuring that there's 1 parking space for each unit on the property, and that's it. So we have quite a few builders who actually have been calling us in the last week to try and get building permits for some of these things as well. Because we were switching to a community planning permitting system, a lot of the changes that they've made won't affect us because the CPP is not considered at all in any of the changes. The province was trying to encourage municipalities to transition to the community planning permit system over the last few years, and there's been very little uptake. So we are going to be one of 4 municipalities that use it, and the only one that's using it in such a large area because we have significant rural lands as well as urban lands and shoreline lands. So some of the changes won't affect us. The one that we're dealing with right now is site plan approval for shoreline residential lots. That is the way we were protecting the environment and looking after the water quality through the lake health system with maintaining vegetation along the shorelines. So that is no longer able to be done as of November 28th. So any applications that we had that were submitted but not approved are all being returned and refunded. And anything that was approved and done is still in effect, but if somebody had to make a change to it, we wouldn't be able to do anything. So luckily that's covered through the CPP though, because that bylaw, the definition of development in the Planning Act, allows us to regulate vegetation. So from that perspective, we're covered. But I think just ourselves and Lake of Bays can do that from a district perspective, talking about the water quality. And then they've removed the appeal rights for people who are third parties for minor variances and consents. Minor variances, we are switching to the community planning permit, so that wouldn't be such a big effect. Consents, though, the only person that can appeal a consent decision is the owner or a municipality at this point. And then they're removing requirement for public meetings for subdivision applications because they're saying that all of the public input should have occurred at the time the zoning or the official plan designation was being put in place. So there's lots of changes. I'm sure we'll be back with more updates as more regulations are issued and things are maybe clarified to a certain extent, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a million, but I'm not asking, so there we go. Councillor Stone?
Thank you. Just a quick question. I read every word of this. It's amazing and tragic almost. With regards to up to 3 units in an urban dwelling, is it only on that footprint? It is, they got the
No.
whole property to,
It's the lot coverage and those sort of provisions and setbacks would still apply, but anything limiting the number of units wouldn't.
thank you.
A quick follow-up to that. We are talking about the urban gentle intensification. Remind me what we are allowed in our rural area and if there is any impact from this in that.
From a rural perspective, no, because the servicing isn't there. The municipal water and sewer services wouldn't be there. But we currently allow 2 units,
Right.
one within the dwelling or one in a separate structure on a property on rural lands.
So that would remain the same because they
Yes.
haven't touched that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Great review, Kirsten. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, moving right along. So, should I mention this before? Okay. The next motion I'm about to read is with respect to all of the bylaw approvals, and it is identical to the one that was in your package with the exception of the bylaw 2022-147, which had outdoor lighting, and that has been pulled, and we're dealing with that separately in January. So with that, I am going to read, we have a motion moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. Be it resolved that bylaw numbers 2020-22, I think I made too many 20s, -138 to 2022-146, and 2022-148 to 2022-152, inclusive, be reported and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 12th day of December 2022. And I am not planning on reading the rest of the list because it is exactly as it was in your package. Questions or comments? No? I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Terrific. Thank you. So, next, I have a motion, fairly straightforward, moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that Council adopts the 2022-2026 Council and Committee calendar as presented in your package. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries. How cool is that? We're whipping through stuff now. Okay, so, next motion moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Be it resolved that Council adopts the 2022-2026 Committees of Council Terms of Reference as presented, and further that a per diem be paid to each Accessibility Advisory Committee member for all regular and special meetings at $50 per meeting. Any questions or comments? Councillor Stone.
Is that just lay members?
Lay members. Yes, yes. No, we're not double dipping. Definitely not. I don't, yeah, really good time.
Did it say lay members?
It didn't, but, you know, we're assuming that we're not going to. Good question. Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Worship. So is it going to be in-person meetings or the virtual too? Or
I think the report refers to both, in-person and virtual. Virtual. I've forgotten how to say virtual. Anyway, I think it's both. The CAO code? Okay, Councillor Stone, did you hear that? CAO Corey thinks we should add lay members in there, just so that we are clear. Just in case. In case. Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, through Through you, Mayor Alcock. So lay members, but I'm also thinking like sometimes a person on accessibility is there from an agency, so they're already paid maybe through their work as a mileage, that kind of thing. Is that, do we get into it?
What did you do before? May I ask?
They didn't, there wasn't. They did
Yes,
mileage, I
CAO
think. I
Corey
think they did
thankfully
mileage
is about to
for-
jump in.
So just for clarification, Your Worship, so it's individuals that the committee would invite to speak on matters? Is that, so this is just pertaining to committee members?
No, like Community Living had a member that would sit on accessibility, but that member isn't a member with lived experience. They were a representative from the agency on behalf.
Perhaps I'm not clear. Perhaps the clerk can.
If I can defer to the deputy clerk, she is the one that would know all.
Deputy Clerk.
Thank
Would you like to add to this debate, please?
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. So in the past, it has been where committee members could submit for mileage or things like that. We did have a budget for that. So that will be gone. It'll just be the $50 per meeting. In our appointing bylaw, we don't actually have anything specifically laying out agencies. So therefore, they may or may not sit on the committee. That would be the choice of the chair and the mayor to decide that. So because that's not laid out, I wouldn't recommend differentiating that because each agency may deal with it differently.
Okay. That was very helpful, thank you. So how do we add lay people? I'm told I'm not allowed to write on here, so. But we're about to find out how this is about to happen. Do we need an amendment? Probably. Do we need an amendment?
We do, Mayor Alcock. Yeah, I heard
Councillor
Councillor
Stone.
Stone.
Would anyone-
Perhaps Councillor Schumacher may second that. And I can certainly add lay members then, if you call the question on the amendment.
Okay, everyone heard what the amendment is. I will call the question. All those in favor? All right, that's unanimous.
And then just the main motion as amended?
Same?
Yes, with just the lay members included on this?
Okay, I have a motion moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Renwick. I don't need to read it again.
You just have to ask for the main motion as amended.
Ask for the main motion as amended. I'm forgetting all of this. As amended, I'll get it, thanks. Thank you for that. All those in favor? That carries too. As amended. I'll just say as amended, not even allowed to do that. No, not even allowed. Okay, hold on. I'm moving along too quickly here. Okay, this is, okay, now I know where we are. So the next motion has been moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that staff be directed to waive fees in memory of Mike Brown as follows. Memorial Skate and Hockey Sessions, December 4th, 2022, 3 hours, Jack Bionda Arena at a rate of $591 plus HST. 2, one additional 3-hour skate to be held over the 2022 holiday season at a rate of $591 plus HST. And finally, Celebration of Life, December 3rd, 2022, at the Active Living Center at a rate of $235 plus HST. And I would ask Councillor Morrison if you'd like to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We brought this up at our last gathering here, and I won't say too much other than to say that the outpouring of support from this town was greatly felt by the family, extended family, and all of the friends of Mike Brown and Jessica and the rest of the gang. It just shows you how amazing our town is, and the outpouring, the amount of people that showed up. Mayor Alcock spoke there that day was tremendous. So this is maybe a small gesture, but you can't imagine what it means to the family. And the money that is saved by them is going into a Youth for Sport Foundation, the Mike Brown Foundation, which is going to allow a lot of youth to play sports in this town that maybe otherwise wouldn't. So thank you, everybody.
And in fact, they've already raised thousands of dollars. Over 25,000. It's amazing, eh? Wow. Are there any questions or comments with respect to this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you for that. All right. Next. Rescinds resolution? What was that one? Oh, right, sorry. Okay. I have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that Council rescinds resolution number GC 11-21, and that was with respect to suspending remuneration for special meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic. That was in our report. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries. Oh, man, it's another package. Okay, all righty. So, all right, I have a motion moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Morrison, whereas the Huntsville Festival of the Arts has requested council waive fees for the use of Rivermill Park from January 16th to March 19th, 2023 for the second annual Snow Village project. Now therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to waive the fees as requested as follows. January 16th to March 19th, 2023, Rivermill Park at a rate of $2,468 plus HST. And on this one, we already have an amendment because there was an error in the amount in our notes. And actually, Dan had the right number in his presentation. So I'm about to read the amendment. That has been moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Renwick. So great that that's in brackets. Be it resolved that the amount of $2,468 be struck out and replaced with $5,706. Any discussion or comments about the amendment? Yes, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. Does this all include hydro costs because they're going to be having lights, et cetera, there? I just want to make sure we're not missing any costs that's going to come back.
I think this is all they've requested. CAO Corey?
So I would have to defer to Director Babineau if I misspeak, but the cost for renting would be all inclusive of the use of the space. So it's not broken out for hydro.
Director Babineau, did you want to add?
Certainly. The electrical is included in the rental, just like any other rental.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Yes. Okay. Right. So now, I have a motion moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Renwick, which, does everybody approve the main motion as amended? And it carries. Thank you so much. I'm not sure that was exactly right, but it was close enough.
Close enough.
It was close enough. Tanya hasn't kicked me yet, so there we go. I have another motion moved by, Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Morrison, whereas in preparation for the expansion or reconstruction in the coming years of Huntsville District Memorial Hospital, the Huntsville Hospital Foundation requires additional space for additional staff in preparation of several years of capital campaign. No kidding. And whereas the Huntsville Hospital Foundation has requested council waive building permit fees for the expansion of their building. Now therefore, be it resolved that council directs the chief building official to waive building permit fees to a maximum of $1,500. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Okay, back number 10, general information. So everybody saw the section with council correspondence. Are there any questions around any of those letters? If not, then we'll carry right on to our next district council meeting is next Monday, at which point the district chair will appoint committee members and all of those other fun things. Did I miss anything from any of the district? Okay. And we have a community flag raising for the Alzheimer's Society of Muskoka on Thursday, January 5th at 11 a.m. in Civic Square. And finally, we did have, under 10.4, an update for information only with respect to Ontario Land Tribunal bylaws, which have, as you can see, number one has been repealed and one amended, and a status report on each of the four. Is there anything you would like to add to that, Director Maxwell? Any questions with respect to those? Seeing none. Wow, okay. 1, 2, 3. I think we're getting there, we're getting there. We're getting there. Wow, okay. I have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2022-153 be received, numbered, and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 12th day of December 2022. All those in favor? How cool is that? Okay, this is so great. You fill it in, too. You step. I have a motion moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Cloutier. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 2:30 p.m. No questions? All those in favor? And that carries too. Thanks, everybody. That was a good